The slap echoed through the penthouse lounge like a gunshot, sharp, brutal, final. Lena Hart's cheek burned crimson as Manhattan's most feared mafia boss stood over her, his ring cutting into her skin, his eyes cold with certainty. She'd stolen from him. Or so he thought. But as blood trickled down her jaw and the crowd held its breath, Lena did something no one expected. She smiled. Then she reached for her phone. This is the story of one slap, one call, and the moment a monster learned he'd just struck the wrong woman. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The Velvet Noir wasn't just a lounge. It was a stage where Manhattan's wealthiest and most dangerous came to perform the theater of power, where deals worth millions were sealed over whiskey that cost more than most people's rent, where blood debts were settled with handshakes that meant more than any contract, where the air itself seemed to hum with barely contained violence. Lena Hart had learned to move through this world like a ghost. She was 26, slender, with dark hair she kept pulled back in a simple ponytail that made her look younger than she was. Her uniform, black slacks, white button-down, sensible flats, was designed for invisibility. She'd perfected the art of being present but unseen, of anticipating needs before they were spoken, of reading the room's temperature and adjusting accordingly. Invisible was survival. Invisible kept you safe. She'd been working at the Velvet Noir for 8 months, long enough to recognize the hierarchy of monsters who frequented the establishment. There were the hedge fund vultures who destroyed companies before dessert, the corrupt politicians who traded favors like baseball cards, the lawyers who could make evidence disappear with a phone call. And then there was Marco DeLuca. He owned the top floor. Hell, rumor had it he owned the entire building, the block, maybe half of Lower Manhattan. At 34, Marco DeLuca had built an empire that operated in the shadows between legitimate business and organized crime. An empire so seamlessly integrated into the city's infrastructure that trying to separate one from the other would be like trying to unweave a tapestry thread by thread. He was handsome in the way that dangerous men often were. Sharp jawline, dark eyes that missed nothing, an Italian suit that probably cost more than Lena made in 6 months. His black hair was always perfectly styled, his shoes always gleamed, and his smile never quite reached his eyes. Lena had served him dozens of times. She knew he took his scotch neat, preferred the Macallan 25, didn't like to be interrupted when he was conducting business, and had a temper that could turn a room cold in seconds. She also knew to never, ever look him directly in the eye. Tonight, the lounge was packed with his usual crowd, capos and enforcers, each one radiating the kind of casual menace that came from a lifetime of getting away with violence. They occupied the private section, a raised platform separated from the main floor by velvet ropes, and the understanding that you didn't cross that threshold unless invited. Lena approached with a tray of drinks, her steps measured, her expression neutral. "Macallan 25, mister. DeLuca," she said quietly, setting the crystal glass on the table before him. "And the Yamazaki for Mr. Conte. The Pappy Van Winkle for... Did I ask you to speak?" Marco's voice was smooth, almost conversational, but there was an edge underneath that made her freeze. "No, sir. I apologize." He waved a hand dismissively, already turning back to his conversation with the man beside him, Vincent Conte, his second in command, a bull of a man with scarred knuckles and dead eyes. Lena distributed the remaining drinks and retreated, relieved to have escaped notice. The evening continued in its usual rhythm. Lena worked her section, refilling glasses before they emptied, clearing plates, maintaining the seamless service that the Velvet Noir was known for. Around her, deals were being made, territories discussed, problems solved with the kind of permanent solutions that would never see a courtroom. She was clearing empties from a side table when she heard it, a sound that cut through the ambient music and conversation like a blade through silk. Silence. The kind of silence that meant something had gone very, very wrong. Lena looked up to see Marco DeLuca standing at his table, his face dark with fury. His hand was at his wrist, touching bare skin where something should have been. "Where the fuck is my watch?" His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The question carried across the room with the weight of a death sentence. The Patek Philippe. Lena had seen it before. A vintage piece, rose gold with a black leather strap, the kind of watch that connoisseurs would recognize immediately. Marco never took it off. It was a signature piece, a symbol of his status, worth easily 6 figures. And now it was gone. Everyone stay exactly where you are, Vincent Conte commanded, rising from his seat. His hand moved to his jacket, where Lena knew he kept a gun. Nobody moves. Nobody leaves. The lounge's other patrons froze. Even the staff stopped mid-motion, trays held aloft, suddenly statues in an increasingly dangerous tableau. Marco's eyes swept the room, calculating, analyzing. Then they landed on Lena. Her blood turned to ice. "You," he said, pointing at her. "Come here." Every instinct screamed at her to run, but running would be an admission of guilt, and guilt in Marco DeLuca's world had only one punishment. Lena walked forward on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The distance between them felt infinite and far too short all at once. "You were near my table," Marco said. It wasn't a question. "I was serving drinks, Mr. DeLuca. I didn't empty your pockets." "Sir, I didn't take empty your pockets." Lena's hands shook as she complied. A pen, her order pad, chapstick, a folded $20 bill, her tips for the evening. She placed each item on the table between them. "Satisfied?" she asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Marco's expression didn't change. "Vincent, search her." "What? No, you can't." But Vincent was already moving. He was thorough, professional, his hands checking her pockets, her waistband, even her shoes. Finding nothing. "She's clean, boss," Vincent reported. Marco's jaw tightened. For a moment, Lena thought she might actually be dismissed, that this nightmare might end without bloodshed. Then his girlfriend spoke. Sophia Romano had been draped across the booth like a bored cat all evening, bleached blonde, surgically enhanced, wearing a dress that cost more than Lena's entire wardrobe. She was beautiful in the way that money could buy, and cruel in the way that came naturally. "Oh, please, Marco," Sophia purred, examining her manicured nails. "She obviously took it. Look at her. She probably needs the money. These people always do." "I didn't touch your watch, Mr. DeLuca," Lena said, her voice stronger now. Fear was giving way to anger. "I've worked here for 8 months. I've never stolen anything. You can check with management. You calling my girl a liar?" Marco's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "I'm saying I didn't take your watch." The room held its breath. Marco DeLuca was not a man accustomed to being contradicted. His empire had been built on the principle that his word was law, his judgment final. To question him was to question the natural order of his universe, and Lena had just questioned him. "You know what I think," Marco said, circling her slowly. "I think you saw an opportunity. I think you figured a girl like you, invisible little waitress, you could just slip a 6-figure watch into your pocket and nobody would notice. I think you underestimated me." "I think you're wrong," Lena said quietly. The slap came out of nowhere. Marco's open palm connected with her cheek with enough force to spin her halfway around. The sound cracked through the lounge like thunder. Lena's vision went white, then red, then slowly cleared to show the room tilted at an odd angle. She realized she was on her knees, her hand pressed to her face, tasting copper. His ring had cut her. She could feel blood trickling down her jaw. The crowd watched in perfect silence. No one moved. No one protested. This was Marco DeLuca's world, and in his world, he could do whatever he wanted to, whoever he wanted. "You're a thief," Marco said, standing over her. "And thieves get punished. Vincent, call the cops. Let them deal with this trash." "The cops won't find anything," Lena said, still on her knees. Her voice was steady despite the ringing in her ears. "Because I didn't take it." "Then you won't mind going to jail while they investigate," Marco said with a cold smile. "Should only take a few days, maybe a few weeks. These things move slow without the right motivation." He was going to destroy her, frame her, make her disappear into the system where someone like her, no connections, no money, no power, could vanish without a trace. Lena touched her bloody cheek and made a decision. She reached into her pocket, the same pocket Vincent had already searched, and pulled out something no one had noticed because no one ever noticed her belongings. An old flip phone. Battered, outdated, the kind of burner people used when they didn't want to be traced. "What the fuck is that?" Vincent asked, his hand moving toward his gun. Lena flipped it open. Her fingers moved across the numbered keypad, a single contact, speed dial 1. I'm giving you one chance to walk away from this, mister. DeLuca, she said quietly. One chance to admit you made a mistake. Marco laughed. Actually laughed. Or what? You're going to call your boyfriend? Your lawyer? Who the fuck do you think? Lena pressed send. The phone rang once, twice. Then a voice answered. Deep, accented, Eastern European, though Lena's American ears couldn't place the specific country. Fica mea, the voice said. My daughter. Lena's eyes never left Marco's face as she spoke. Her voice was different now. Not the soft, apologetic tone of a waitress. Something else. Something cold. Dad, she said simply, I need you. Where are you? The Velvet Noir. Lower Manhattan. A pause. Then, who touched you? Lena's free hand traced the cut on her cheek. Marco DeLuca. The silence on the other end of the line was more terrifying than any threat. I'll be there in 20 minutes, the voice said. Don't let him leave. The line went dead. Lena closed the phone and looked up at Marco. His expression had shifted from amusement to confusion to something that might have been the first tremor of concern. Who the fuck was that? He demanded. My father. Your father? Sophia laughed from the booth. Oh, this is rich. What's he gonna do, Marco, sue you? But Vincent wasn't laughing. Vincent, who had been in this life long enough to recognize danger in all its forms, was staring at Lena with new eyes. Boss, he said quietly, maybe we should... Should what? Marco snapped. Be scared of some waitress's daddy? I don't give a shit if he's the fucking mayor. I own this city. Not all of it, Lena said softly. The words hung in the air like a prophecy. Marco's phone rang. He pulled it out, irritated, and answered without checking the caller ID. What? Lena watched his face change, color draining, eyes widening. The phone actually trembled in his hand. Yes, he said, his voice thin. Yes, I understand. No, I didn't know. He lowered the phone slowly, staring at Lena like he was seeing her for the first time. Who are you? He whispered. I'm nobody, Lena said, getting to her feet. Her cheeks still throbbed, blood still dripped down her jaw, but she stood straight, shoulders back. I'm just a waitress. I'm invisible. Isn't that what you've always thought? Boss, who was on the phone? Vincent asked. Marco didn't answer. He was running through mental calculations, pulling up files from memory, connecting dots that should never have connected. Romanian, he said suddenly. Your accent. Just a trace, but it's there. I should have heard it before. Romanian. Lena said nothing. There's only one Romanian family with real power in the Eastern European underworld. Marco continued, his voice getting quieter with each word. The Vasiles. But they operate in Europe. They don't have interests here. They don't... He stopped. Vasily, he repeated. Lena... Hart. Not your real name, is it? Lena Elena Vasily, she said quietly. Hart is my mother's maiden name. American. She died when I was 12. Cancer. My father sent me here to finish school, to live a normal life away from his world. And I did. I waited tables. I paid my own rent. I was nobody special. Until tonight, Vincent breathed. Until tonight, Lena agreed. The lounge's door opened. Every head turned. They weren't cops. The four men who entered wore expensive suits, moved with military precision, and carried themselves with the absolute confidence of people who had killed before and would kill again without hesitation. They didn't announce themselves. They simply took positions at each corner of the room, blocking exits, their eyes scanning for threats. Then the fifth man entered. Victor Vasile was 56 years old, built like a tank, with iron gray hair and eyes the color of winter storms. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marco's, a white shirt open at the collar, and no jewelry except for a simple platinum wedding band, memorial to a wife 10 years dead. He didn't look around the room. He didn't need to. His attention locked immediately on his daughter. Victor crossed the distance between them in 4 long strides. His large hands cupped Lena's face, tilting it to examine the cut on her cheek, the swelling already forming, the blood that had dried in a thin line down to her collar. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, almost tender. Fiica mea, my little girl, Who did this? Lena didn't answer with words. She just turned her head slightly, her eyes indicating Marco. Victor's hands fell from her face. He turned to look at Marco DeLuca for the first time. You, he said simply. Marco had gone pale. Beside him, Vincent had taken a step back, distancing himself from what was about to happen. Even Sophia had shut up, her earlier bravado evaporating in the face of something she couldn't charm or manipulate her way out of. Mr. Vasily, Marco said, his voice carefully controlled. There's been a misunderstanding. I didn't know she was your... You hit my daughter. I thought she had stolen. You hit my daughter. Victor took a step forward. Marco actually flinched. Mr. Vasily, please. I made a mistake. I can make this right. Can you make her cheek whole? Can you take back the humiliation? Can you return her blood to her body? I'll do anything, Marco said, and now the fear was naked in his voice. Anything you want. Money, territory. I'll give you whatever you... I don't want your money, Victor said quietly. I don't want your territory. I want you to understand something, Marco DeLuca. Do you know what I am? Marco nodded jerkily. Say it. You're the head of the Vasily family. You control the Eastern European networks, trafficking, arms, everything from Prague to Moscow. And do you know what that makes my daughter? Marco's throat worked as he swallowed. Untouchable. Off. Limits, Victor corrected. There are rules in our world. Unwritten rules. We don't touch each other's children. We don't bring family into business. It's the one thing that separates us from animals. And you, he gestured at Lena's bloody face. You broke that rule. I didn't know. Marco's composure was cracking. How was I supposed to know? She's a fucking waitress. She's my daughter. Victor's voice didn't rise in volume, but the force behind it made everyone in the room take a step back. And you raised your hand to her, in front of witnesses, in front of your own people. Please, Marco said, and now he was begging. Please, Mr. Vasily, I'll make this right. Just tell me how. Victor turned away from him, dismissive. He looked at his daughter instead. Lena, are you hurt anywhere else? No, Tata. Did he threaten you? He was going to call the police, frame me for stealing his watch. Victor's jaw tightened. And did you take this watch? No? Then where is it? For the first time that evening, Lena smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Why don't you ask Sophia? Every eye in the room turned to Marco's girlfriend. She'd been trying to blend into the booth upholstery, but now she was suddenly terribly visible. What? Sophia's voice came out high and thin. I didn't. Check her purse, Lena said calmly. That's ridiculous, Sophia sputtered. Marco, tell them. Vincent, Marco said quietly. Check her purse. Baby, no, this is crazy. She's trying to check her purse. Vincent moved to the booth. Sophia clutched her designer bag to her chest like a shield, but Vincent simply took it from her. She was crying now, mascara running, her beautiful face ugly with fear and rage. Vincent opened the purse. His hand disappeared inside. When it emerged, he was holding the Patek Philippe. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. No, Sophia said. No, I was just... Just what? Marco's voice was deadly quiet. Just stealing from me? Just letting me assault an innocent woman? Just what, Sophia? I was going to give it back. I swear. I wanted to teach you a lesson. You're always looking at other women. I just wanted... Get out. Marco, please, get out. He roared it this time, the rage he directed at Lena now finding its proper target. Get out before I forget you're not worth the bullet. Sophia grabbed her purse and ran. Her heels clattered on the marble floor. The door slammed behind her. Silence fell again. Marco turned back to Victor, the watch dangling from his hand. His face was ashen. Mr. Vasily, he said carefully, this changes things. She was innocent. I was wrong. I apologize. Deeply. Sincerely. I will make reparations. Whatever your daughter wants. Whatever you think is fair. Victor said nothing. He simply looked at Marco the way an entomologist might look at an insect he was about to pin to a board. My father is a reasonable man, Lena said into the silence. He believes in proportional response. Marco's shoulders sagged slightly with relief. Yes, proportional, that's fair. You humiliated me in front of a room full of people, Lena continued. You struck me. You drew my blood. You were going to destroy my life over a crime I didn't commit. And I'm sorry, Marco said quickly. Truly sorry. Proportional response, Lena repeated. She looked at her father. What do you think is proportional, Tata? Victor's expression didn't change. In the old country, there is a saying, a hand raised against family must be taken, but we are civilized men. We adapt. He pulled a gun from his jacket, a Beretta 92, chrome-plated, almost beautiful in the lounge's soft lighting. Wait, Marco stumbled backward. Wait, please. I said I was sorry. On your knees, Victor commanded. Mr. Vasile, on your knees! Marco dropped like a puppet with cut strings. He was shaking now, tears actually forming in his eyes. The mighty Marco De Luca, reduced to a sobbing wreck in his own establishment. Victor pressed the gun to Marco's forehead. You will understand, he said quietly, that I could end you right now. Everyone in this room knows you deserve it. Your own people know you were in the wrong. No one would question it. No one would avenge you. Please, Marco whimpered. But my daughter. Victor glanced at Lena. She has a soft heart, like her mother. So I will give you a choice. Anything. You can die tonight. Quick, clean. Your empire distributed among your captains. Your name forgotten within a year. Marco's breath came in ragged gasps. Or, Victor continued, you can live, but you will owe a debt to her. He nodded toward Lena. Your life for hers, bound by blood and honor. You will serve her, protect her, become her weapon when she needs a weapon, her shield when she needs a shield. You will be hers, completely, until the debt is paid. How long, Marco managed to ask. Until she says it's paid, Victor said simply. Could be a month, could be a lifetime. That's for her to decide. Marco looked at Lena, really looked at her for the first time, saw not a waitress but a woman who held his life in her hands. What do you want? He asked her directly. Lena walked forward until she stood beside her father. She looked down at Marco, this man who had seemed so powerful an hour ago, now broken and humiliated on his own floor. She touched her bloody cheek, remembered the crack of his palm against her face, the laughter of his girlfriend, the way the crowd had watched and done nothing. I want, she said slowly, to know what you would choose, death with dignity or life with shame. I choose life, Marco said without hesitation. I choose service. I choose you. Lena nodded slowly. She held out her hand. Marco stared at it for a moment, not understanding. Then he did. He took her hand and kissed it, the old gesture, the formal acknowledgement of fealty. Then you're mine, Lena said softly. Get up. Marco rose on shaking legs. Victor lowered the gun, but didn't put it away. There will be rules, Lena said. First, you never raise your hand to me again, ever, for any reason. Never, Marco agreed. Second, when I need you, you come. No questions, no delays. Yes. Third, you tell no one about my family. As far as the world is concerned, I'm still just Lena Hart, waitress. Do you understand? I understand. And finally, Lena smiled, and it was almost sad. You learn to see people, Marco, really see them. Because invisible people, we see everything. She turned to her father. We can go now, Tata. Victor nodded. His men moved toward the door, creating an exit corridor. But before she left, Lena turned back to the room, to the crowd that had watched her humiliation in silence, to the staff who hadn't defended her, to Vincent and the other capos who had stood by while their boss brutalized an innocent woman. Remember this night, she said clearly. Remember that the person you think is powerless might be the most dangerous one in the room. Remember that cruelty has consequences. And remember, she touched her bloody cheek one last time, that I remember all of you. Then she walked out, her father beside her, leaving Marco De Luca standing in the wreckage of his empire, bound by an oath he couldn't break, changed by a lesson he couldn't unlearn. The Velvet Noir would never be the same. Neither would he. And Lena Hart, Lena Elena Vasile, had just stopped being invisible forever. The black Mercedes S-Class glided through Manhattan's late-night streets like a shark through dark water. Lena sat in the back beside her father, watching the city lights blur past the tinted windows. Her cheek had stopped bleeding, but the cut still throbbed with each heartbeat, a steady reminder of how quickly everything had changed. Victor hadn't spoken since they'd left the Velvet Noir. He sat with one arm along the seat back, his other hand resting on his knee, fingers drumming a slow, thoughtful rhythm against expensive fabric. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood each other without needing words. But eventually, words came anyway. "You called me," Victor said in Romanian, his native tongue feeling like home in Lena's ears after hours of English. "After 8 months of radio silence, you finally called." I didn't want to bring you into my life here," Lena replied in the same language. "You sent me to America to be normal, to be safe. And how did that work out?" Lena touched her cheek gingerly. "I was doing fine until tonight." Victor's jaw tightened. "That man put his hands on you, in front of witnesses. He humiliated you, and you spared him." "I claimed him instead." "Why?" It was a fair question. Lena leaned back against the leather seat, considering her answer carefully. The city continued to slide past outside. Buildings that housed thousands of people, each one living their own small dramas, unaware that empires were shifting in the darkness around them. "Because killing him would have been easy," she said finally. "And easy answers don't teach anyone anything. He thought I was powerless. Now he knows better. He'll carry that knowledge for the rest of his life. And if he tries to break the oath, if he turns on you, then you can kill him," Lena said with a small smile. "But he won't. Marco DeLuca is a lot of things, but he's not stupid. He knows what I could have taken from him tonight. He'll honor the debt." Victor studied his daughter for a long moment. "You've grown hard, Fiica Mea. When did that happen?" "When Mama died," Lena said quietly. "You sent me away because you thought America would keep me soft. But grief doesn't care about geography, Tata. I learned to be hard here, just in different ways than I would have learned in Romania." The car turned onto a quieter street, heading toward the Upper East Side where Victor kept a penthouse for his rare visits to New York. The building was one of those pre-war masterpieces, all Art Deco elegance and old money discretion. "You can't go back to that life," Victor said as they pulled up to the entrance. "You understand that, yes? After tonight, you're exposed. Every family in the city will know who you are by morning. The invisibility you worked so hard to maintain, it's gone." "I know." "So what will you do?" Lena looked at her father, this man who had built an empire on violence and fear, who had loved her mother with a tenderness that seemed impossible given what he was, who had sent his only daughter across an ocean to protect her from a world he couldn't leave behind. "I'm going to finish what I started," she said. "I claimed Marco DeLuca's life. That means his empire is mine to shape. I'm going to change it from the inside, make it into something better." Victor laughed, a short, sharp sound without much humor. "Better? You think you can reform a man like that? Make him into something clean?" "No," Lena said, "but I can make him into something more controlled, more strategic, less cruel. That's better than what he is now." They rode the private elevator to the penthouse in silence. The doors opened onto a space that managed to be both luxurious and impersonal, the kind of place designed for temporary occupation by people who owned homes in a dozen cities. Victor's men had already swept the apartment, confirming it was secure. "Get some rest," Victor said, loosening his tie. "Tomorrow we'll discuss how to manage the fallout from tonight." But Lena didn't move toward the guest room. She stood in the middle of the living room, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, her mind already racing ahead to what came next. "I need to go back," she said. Victor paused in the act of pouring himself a drink. "Back where?" "To the Velvet Noir, tomorrow night, for my shift." "Absolutely not." No." Victor's voice was firm. "You walk back into that place, you're asking for trouble. DeLuca's people are Marco's people," Lena interrupted. "And Marco is mine now, which means they're mine too. They just don't know it yet." "Lena, if I disappear now, I look weak. I look like I'm hiding. But if I show up tomorrow night like nothing happened, if I walk back in there with my head high and serve drinks like I own the place, because I do in a way, Then everyone will understand. The power has shifted, and they'll have to accept it. Victor set down his glass with a careful control that told Lena he wanted to throw it. You're going to get yourself killed. You didn't raise a coward. I raised a daughter who was supposed to be safe. The words hung between them, sharp with old pain and new fear. Victor turned away, his shoulders tight with tension. Your mother made me promise, he said quietly. When she knew she was dying, she made me swear I'd keep you out of this life, that I'd give you a chance to be normal, to be happy, to find love that wasn't stained with blood. Lena crossed the room and put her hand on her father's arm. You kept that promise, Tata. You gave me that chance. 8 months of normal. 8 months of being just Lena Hart, invisible waitress. But that ended tonight. Not because of you. Because of Marco DeLuca's pride and his girlfriend's jealousy and my own choice to call you instead of just taking the beating. You should have called me sooner, Victor muttered. Maybe. But I called when I needed you, and you came, just like you always do. Victor pulled his daughter into a hug. Gentle, despite his strength, mindful of her injuries. If you're going back to that place, you're not going alone. I'll have my men. No, Lena said against his chest. No bodyguards, no obvious protection. That's not how this works. I need to walk back in there on my own terms. Show everyone that I don't need an army at my back to be dangerous. Then what do you need? Lena pulled back and smiled. I need to have a conversation with Marco DeLuca. Tonight, before he has time to think too much about what happened. Victor's eyes narrowed. You're going to push him already? Test the oath? I'm going to establish the rules of our new relationship, Lena corrected. There's a difference. 30 minutes later, Lena was back in the Mercedes, this time alone except for the driver, one of her father's most trusted men, a taciturn Bulgarian named Dmitri, who had been protecting the Vasil family for 20 years. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer opinions. He simply drove where she told him to drive and kept one hand always within reach of the gun under his jacket. Marco DeLuca lived in a converted warehouse in Tribeca, the kind of industrial chic space that cost millions and was designed to look like it hadn't cost anything at all. Exposed brick, original hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. It was both a home and a statement. Marco DeLuca had arrived. Lena texted him from the car. I'm downstairs. We need to talk. The response came within seconds. Come up. Penthouse level. Doors open. Dmitri insisted on checking the entrance first, his experienced eyes scanning for threats, for ambush points, for anything that might put his boss's daughter in danger. When he was satisfied, or as satisfied as he was going to get, he nodded. I'll be right here, he said in heavily accented English. You need me, you shout. I'll be fine, Dmitri, but thank you. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than it was. Lena used the time to center herself, to push aside the pain still radiating from her cheek, to focus on what she needed to accomplish. Marco had sworn an oath tonight. Now she needed to make sure he understood what that oath really meant. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. And there was Marco DeLuca, standing by the windows, backlit by the city lights, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He'd changed out of his blood-spattered shirt into a simple black t-shirt and jeans. Without the expensive suit, he looked younger, more vulnerable, more human. You came, he said, and there was genuine surprise in his voice. You thought I wouldn't? I thought you'd want to put as much distance between us as possible. Marco gestured to a leather couch. Sit. Please, can I get you something? Water, coffee, something stronger? Water's fine. Marco moved to the kitchen, an open-plan masterpiece of stainless steel and black granite, and returned with 2 glasses of filtered water. He handed one to Lena and sat in the chair across from her, maintaining a careful distance. Your father's men checked the building before you came up, he said. It wasn't a question. Of course. Smart. Marco took a drink. For what it's worth, I meant what I said tonight, the oath. I won't break it. I know. How can you know? Lena set down her glass and looked at him directly. Because you're a survivor, Marco. You didn't build what you've built by being stupid or reckless. You know what my father would do to you if you betrayed me. More than that, you know what I could do. You saw it tonight. I could have let him kill you. I didn't. That's a gift you won't throw away. Marco was quiet for a moment, then, "You're not what I thought you were." "No one ever is. That's the problem with only seeing surfaces." "I should have looked deeper, should have seen—" "What? That the quiet waitress might have connections? That invisible people might have power?" Lena shook her head. "You couldn't have known. That was the point. My father sent me here to be invisible. I was very good at it. Until tonight." "Until tonight," Lena agreed. She leaned forward slightly. "Let's talk about what happens now." Marco set down his glass and gave her his full attention. This was the Marco she'd seen at the Velvet Noir when he was conducting business, focused, analytical, ready to negotiate. "You own my life," he said bluntly, "which means you own my territory, my operations, my people. For as long as you say. I'm clear on that." "Good. But I don't want to own everything. I want partnership." Marco's eyebrows rose. "Partnership. You've built something substantial, Marco. Not clean, not legal, but substantial. I'm not interested in destroying that. I'm interested in refining it." "Refining. Making it smarter, more strategic, less violent when violence isn't necessary, more profitable, more sustainable." Marco studied her for a long moment. "You want to reform me." "I want to redirect you," Lena corrected. "There's a difference. I'm not naive enough to think you're going to become a philanthropist. But I do think you're smart enough to understand that the old ways of doing business, the brutal, territorial, everyone bleeds eventually ways, those are dying. The families that survive the next 20 years will be the ones that adapt. And you think you can teach me to adapt? I think I can show you possibilities you haven't considered. In exchange, you give me access to your world, your connections, your resources, when I need them." "That's it?" Marco sounded skeptical. "You bind my life to yours, and all you want is occasional access to my organization?" "For now," Lena said. "The terms may change as circumstances change. That's the nature of debt. It evolves." Marco stood and walked back to the windows, looking out at the city he believed he owned. "My people aren't going to accept this. Vincent, the capos, they'll see it as weakness. They'll think I've been compromised." "You have been compromised," Lena said calmly. "You just need to decide whether that's a weakness or an evolution. How you present it to your people will determine how they react." "And how would you present it?" Lena rose and joined him at the window. Side by side, they looked out at Manhattan, this city of 8 million souls, where power and poverty existed inches apart, where empires rose and fell with the changing of the seasons. "Tell them the truth," she said. "You made a mistake. You raised your hand against the wrong person. You could have died for that mistake, but instead you negotiated a new alliance, an alliance with a family that has reach beyond anything your organization currently has. Eastern European connections, international networks, resources that make your territory look small. They'll ask what you get out of it. And you'll tell them I get your loyalty, your protection, your expertise when I need it. That's fair exchange." Marco turned to look at her, and for the first time since she'd entered his penthouse, she saw something other than fear or calculation in his eyes. She saw curiosity. "Why are you really doing this?" he asked. "And don't give me the line about teaching me a lesson. You could teach that lesson 100 different ways. Why bind yourself to me? Why put yourself in a position where you'll have to deal with my world?" It was a perceptive question. Lena appreciated that he'd asked it. "Because I'm tired of being invisible," she said simply. 8 months, Marco. 8 months I spent serving drinks to people who never saw me, who looked through me like I was furniture, and I told myself that was fine, that was safe. That was what my father wanted for me. But tonight, when you hit me," she touched her cheek, feeling the tender swelling. "Something broke. Not just my skin, something inside me. And I realized I don't want to be invisible anymore. I want to build something, shape something, matter." "And you think you can do that through me?" "I think I can do that with you," Lena corrected, "if you're willing to meet me halfway." Marco was quiet for so long that Lena thought she might have misjudged him. Then he extended his hand. "Partners," he said, "with the understanding that I still owe you a life debt. That comes first. Always." Lena took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, still slightly tremulous from the adrenaline of the evening's events. "Partners," she agreed. Now, about tomorrow night. Tomorrow night? I'm working my shift at the Velvet Noir. Business as usual. Marco's hand tightened on hers reflexively before he released it. That's insane. After what happened tonight, everyone will be watching to see what I do next. If I hide, I look weak. If I come back, Lena smiled. I establish dominance. My people will be there. Vincent, the others. They won't know how to react to you. Then you need to make sure they know before I arrive. Call a meeting. Tonight. Explain the new situation. Make it clear that I'm under your protection now. That anyone who touches me answers to you. And to your father, Marco added. That too. But emphasize the first part. I'm yours to protect. That makes it personal for you. Not just political fear of my father. Your people will understand that better. Marco nodded slowly, his strategic mind already working through the implications. Vincent's going to push back. He's old school, doesn't like change. Then handle Vincent. That's your job. Mine is to show up tomorrow night and prove that nothing has really changed except the power structure. Everything has changed, Lena. On the surface, maybe, but underneath? I'm still going to serve drinks, still going to smile politely, still going to do my job. I'll just be doing it with the knowledge that I could end any man in that room with a single phone call. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be. Lena moved toward the elevator. I should go. My father will worry if I'm gone too long. Call your meeting, Marco. Make sure your people understand the new reality. I'll see you tomorrow night. Lena? Marco's voice stopped her at the elevator doors. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About tonight. About not seeing you clearly. About the hit. Lena touched the button to summon the elevator. Save your apologies. Just make sure it never happens again, to me or to anyone else who doesn't deserve it. I can't promise that. My world doesn't work that way. Then change your world, Lena said as the doors opened. You've got the power. Use it for something other than fear. The ride down was faster than the ride up. Dmitri was waiting exactly where she'd left him, his eyes scanning the lobby for threats, even as he opened the car door for her. All good? He asked. All good. Back at the penthouse, Victor was still awake, sitting in the dark living room with his phone and a glass of expensive vodka. He looked up when Lena entered, his expression unreadable. You saw him? I did. And? And we have an understanding. He'll prepare his people for my return to work tomorrow. I'll start establishing my presence in his organization. Slowly, carefully, but definitively. Victor drained his glass and stood. You're playing a dangerous game, Fika Mea. I learned from the best. Your mother would have hated this. Mama wanted me to be happy, Lena said softly. She never specified how. Victor crossed to his daughter and kissed her forehead, gently, avoiding the injured side of her face. Sleep. Tomorrow will be harder than you think. But sleep didn't come easily. Lena lay in the guest room bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the events of the evening over and over. The slap. The blood. Her father's face when he saw her injury. Marco's fear. The oath. The shift in power that had happened so quickly, it still felt unreal. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. This is Vincent. Marco told us about the arrangement. I don't like it, but I'll respect it. For now. Welcome to the family, Princess. Lena smiled in the darkness. The nickname was meant to be insulting, a reminder that she was an outsider, someone who hadn't earned her place through the traditional channels. But Vincent didn't understand. She'd never wanted to be part of a traditional family structure. She wanted to rebuild it from the ground up. Another text, this one from Marco. Meeting done. Everyone's on board. Mostly. Come in through the back entrance tomorrow. I'll have someone waiting to escort you. And Lena? Thank you for not killing me, for giving me a chance to be better. I won't waste it. Lena typed a response. Don't thank me yet. The hard part is just beginning. She set the phone aside and finally closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would walk back into the Velvet Noir. Tomorrow she would face the people who had watched her humiliation and done nothing. Tomorrow she would begin the slow, careful process of transforming Marco De Luca's empire from within. But tonight, She was still just Lena, still her father's daughter, still carrying her mother's memory like a candle in the dark, still learning what it meant to have power and how to wield it without becoming the thing she was trying to change. The cut on her cheek throbbed. She touched it gently, feeling the swelling, the heat of inflammation, the physical proof that everything had changed. Tomorrow, she thought, tomorrow the real work begins. And somewhere across the city, in a converted warehouse in Tribeca, Marco DeLuca stood at his window and wondered what he'd agreed to, wondered if this partnership would save him or destroy him, wondered if the quiet waitress with eyes like winter storms would be his redemption or his ruin. He poured himself another drink and toasted the empty room. "To invisible people," he said quietly, "may we learn to see them before it's too late." The city lights sparkled below, indifferent to the dramas unfolding in the darkness. Manhattan never slept, never stopped, never cared who rose or fell, as long as the money kept flowing and the power kept shifting, and the stories kept being written in blood and compromise, and the desperate hope that tomorrow might be different from today. Lena dreamed of her mother that night, dreamed of gentle hands braiding her hair, of soft Romanian lullabies, of a time before cancer and death and the long journey to America. In the dream, her mother smiled and touched her cheek, the injured one, and the pain melted away. "You're stronger than you know, Iubirea mea," her mother whispered. "Stronger than your father, stronger than me. Use that strength wisely. Use it with mercy. Use it to build, not destroy." "I'll try, Mama," Dreamlena promised. "That's all anyone can do, my love. Try, and keep trying, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." When Lena woke, dawn was breaking over Manhattan. Golden light streamed through the windows, painting everything in shades of hope and possibility. Her cheeks still hurt, but the swelling had gone down slightly. She touched it and thought of her mother's dream hands, of Marco's fear, of her father's love, of the empire she'd claimed with a single phone call. Today she would return to the Velvet Noir. Today she would show them all what invisible really meant. Today, everything would change. The back entrance to the Velvet Noir was nothing like the grand front doors where Manhattan's elite made their entrances. This was where deliveries arrived, where staff shuffled in for shifts, where the unsexy machinery of luxury happened away from paying eyes. Concrete steps led down to a steel door that had been painted black so many times the surface looked almost liquid in the dim light. Lena stood at the top of those steps at exactly 7:45, 15 minutes before her shift. She wore her usual uniform, black slacks, white button-down, comfortable flats. Her hair was pulled back in the same simple ponytail. The only visible difference was the bruise on her cheek, dark purple now, impossible to hide even with the makeup she'd carefully applied. She'd chosen not to hide it. Dmitri had driven her here against his better judgment, his disapproval radiating from every line of his body as he'd opened the car door. "Your father will not like this," he'd said in his heavy accent. "My father will survive," Lena had replied. "Wait here. I'll text when my shift ends." Now she descended the steps alone, each footfall deliberate, her heart rate steady despite knowing what waited on the other side of that door. This was the test. Not last night's confrontation with her father present, his men flanking her, his power making her untouchable. This was her walking back into Marco DeLuca's world alone, with nothing but the oath he'd sworn and the partnership they'd negotiated. The door opened before she reached it. Vincent Conti stood in the doorway, his bulk filling the frame. In the harsh fluorescent light of the service corridor, he looked even more brutal than he had in the lounge's soft ambiance, all scar tissue and hard angles. A man carved from violence and survival. "Princess," he said, the nickname dripping with something between mockery and grudging respect. "Right on time." "I'm always on time, Vincent. You've just never noticed before." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Yeah, well, a lot of things I didn't notice. Marco's made it real clear we need to start paying attention." He stepped aside, letting her enter. "He's waiting in his office. Wants to see you before you start your shift." Lena had been in the Velvet Noir's back corridors countless times, but she'd never been to Marco's office. That was inner sanctum territory, where real business happened, where decisions were made that determined who lived and who disappeared into the Hudson wearing concrete shoes. Vincent led her through a maze of hallways, past the kitchen where prep cooks were already working, past storage rooms and employee lockers, past two men who stopped their conversation to stare as she passed. Word had spread. Of course it had. In Marco's world, secrets lasted about as long as ice cubes in August. The office was surprisingly modest: wood paneling, leather furniture, a desk that had probably been expensive 40 years ago and was now just well worn. Marco sat behind that desk, reviewing something on his laptop. He looked up when Vincent knocked on the open door. "She's here, boss." "Thanks, Vincent. Close the door on your way out." Vincent hesitated. "You want me to—" "I said close the door." The big man left, pulling the door shut with a quiet click that somehow felt louder than a slam. Marco gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit, please." Lena sat, studying him in the better light. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he'd slept about as well as she had. His shirt was crisp, but his tie was loose, his usual armor of perfection showing cracks. "How's the face?" he asked. "Sore, but I've had worse." "I doubt that. You'd be surprised what I survived growing up in my father's world." Lena crossed her legs, projecting calm she didn't entirely feel. "Your meeting with the capos went well?" Define well. Nobody quit. Nobody challenged me directly. Vincent made some noise about maintaining traditions and not letting outsiders dictate terms, but he fell in line. Marco leaned back in his chair. "They're scared, Lena, of you. Of your father. Of what this arrangement means for their positions in the organization." "Good. Fear is useful. It keeps people honest." "Is that what your father taught you?" "Among other things." Lena met his eyes directly. "Are you going to ask me what I actually learned growing up in the Vasile family? Or are you going to keep dancing around it?" Marco was quiet for a moment, then, "Fine. What did Victor Vasile teach his daughter?" "That power is only real if people believe in it. That loyalty is bought with consistent action, not pretty words. That violence should be a last resort, not a first response. And that the most dangerous person in any room is the one nobody's paying attention to." Clearly that last lesson took. Clearly. Lena shifted in her chair. "Marco, I need to know something. Last night you swore an oath. This morning you've had time to think about it, to talk to your people, to really understand what you agreed to. Are you having second thoughts?" "Honestly? Yes." The admission surprised her with its directness. Marco stood and walked to the small bar in the corner of his office, pouring himself 2 fingers of scotch, even though it wasn't even 8 in the evening yet. "I've been running this organization for 6 years, he said, not turning around. "Built it from nothing. My father was a nobody, a collector for the Gambini family, spent his whole life taking orders, died with nothing to show for it except debts and regrets. I swore I'd never be like him. I'd be the one giving orders, building something that mattered, making people respect me." "And you did," Lena said quietly. "Did I?" Marco turned to face her. "Or did I just become another thug with delusions of grandeur? Another Marco DeLuca in a long line of men who think they own this city right up until the moment they discover they don't? You're asking the wrong questions." "Then what should I be asking?" Lena stood and crossed to where he stood by the bar. "Ask yourself what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what your pride tells you to want. What do you really want, Marco?" He looked at her, really looked, the way he hadn't in 8 months of her serving his drinks. "I want to matter. I want to build something that lasts longer than me, something that my kids could inherit without it destroying them." He laughed, bitter. "Except I don't have kids. Don't even have a real relationship. Just a string of Sophias, pretty, expensive, ultimately meaningless. Then build something different. With you? With me? With your people? With whatever resources you have." Lena took the scotch from his hand and set it down on the bar. "But first you have to decide if you're actually willing to change, or if you're just going to keep being the same Marco DeLuca who hits waitresses because his girlfriend stole a watch." The words hung between them, sharp and unforgiving. Marco flinched but didn't look away. "I want to change," he said quietly. "I just don't know if I can." "Then we'll find out together." Lena checked her watch. "I have 3 minutes before my shift starts. Are we good here?" "Yeah, we're good." Marco moved back to his desk and pulled something from the drawer. A key card. "This gives you access to all areas of the building, including this office. You need to talk to me. You come find me. You don't wait for permission. Lena took the key card, feeling the weight of what it represented. Trust, access, partnership. One more thing, Marco said. Tonight's going to be busy. Friday night, plus word is out about what happened. People are going to come just to see you, to see how this plays out. My people will be watching every interaction. The other patrons will be looking for weakness. Let them look. Lena, I'll be fine, Marco. I didn't survive 26 years in Victor Vasili's world just to fall apart because some rich assholes want to stare at the waitress with the bruised face. She left his office and made her way to the employee area, where she clocked in exactly at 8. The other servers were already gathered for the pre-shift briefing, 5 women and 2 men, all carefully selected for their ability to be attractive, efficient, and discreet. They went silent when Lena entered. Maya, the shift supervisor, recovered first. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who'd been managing front-of-house operations longer than Lena had been working there. She cleared her throat. Lena, good to see you. We weren't sure if you'd be coming in tonight. Why wouldn't I? Lena asked, her tone perfectly neutral. Well, given what happened last night, we all heard about... Maya gestured vaguely at Lena's face. The incident. The incident where Mr. DeLuca struck me for a theft I didn't commit? Lena's voice was calm, almost conversational. That incident? The room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. The other servers exchanged glances, uncertain how to react. This wasn't how things were discussed in their world. You didn't name the violence, you didn't acknowledge the power imbalances. You certainly didn't confront them head-on. The situation has been resolved, Maya said carefully. Mr. DeLuca has made it clear that you're to be treated with the utmost respect moving forward. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with him directly. Or with me, Lena added, since apparently I have access to management now. One of the other servers, Jessica, young and ambitious and always angling for better tables, spoke up. So what? You're like, in charge now? Because your dad's some big shot? No, Jessica, I'm not in charge. I'm exactly what I was yesterday, a server working the floor, trying to make rent and tips. The only difference is that now everyone knows I'm not as powerless as I looked. That's a pretty big difference, muttered Tom, one of the male servers. Is it? Lena looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. Because from where I'm standing, nothing fundamental has changed. Mr. DeLuca still owns this establishment. Maya still runs the floor. You all still have your sections and your regulars. I still have mine. We all still smile and serve and pretend not to hear the things we hear. Except now you could end any of us with a phone call, Jessica said, her tone halfway between accusation and awe. I could have done that yesterday, Lena said quietly. I just chose not to. Same as I'm choosing not to today. Same as I'll choose not to tomorrow. Unless someone gives me a reason to make a different choice. The implication settled over the room like frost. Maya cleared her throat again, eager to move past the tension. Right. Well, let's review tonight's reservations and get you all on the floor. Lena, you've got your usual section, the main floor tables, not the private booths. Actually, Lena said, I'd like the private section tonight. Maya blinked. The private section is for Vincent and the other for Mr. DeLuca's personal guest. You've never worked that section. I'd like to start. I don't think that's... Check with Marco, Lena said, using his first name deliberately. I think you'll find it's fine. Maya pulled out her phone, typed a quick message, and waited. The response came within seconds. Her expression shifted from skeptical to resigned. Mr. DeLuca says you can work wherever you want, she said. Private section it is. The other servers absorbed this new reality in silence. The hierarchy they'd understood for months, maybe years, was rearranging itself in real time, and they were all trying to figure out where they fit in the new order. Any other questions? Maya asked, her tone making it clear she hoped there weren't. No one spoke. Then let's get to work. It's going to be a long night. The Velvet Noir opened its doors at 8:30, and by 9 the main floor was already packed. Maya hadn't been wrong. Word had spread, and half the crowd was there for the show. They wanted to see the waitress who'd brought down Marco DeLuca, the girl whose father had made the city's most dangerous man kneel. They wanted to see if she'd break. Lena moved through the private section with the same efficiency she'd always had, but there was something different in her bearing now. She didn't hunch her shoulders to make herself smaller. She didn't avert her eyes when men stared too long. She met gazes directly, served drinks with quiet competence, and navigated the space like she owned it. Because in a way, she did. Vincent and two other capos occupied the largest booth, the same one Marco had been sitting in when his watch went missing. They watched Lena approach with expressions ranging from hostile to curious. "Gentlemen," Lena said, her voice pleasant, "can I start you with drinks?" "Macallan 25 for me," Vincent said. "Anthony wants the pappy. Sal's good with whatever beer you got on tap." Lena noted the orders on her pad. "Coming right up. Any appetizers?" "Yeah," Anthony spoke up. He was younger than Vincent, maybe early 30s, with slicked back hair and too much cologne. "I got a question. You really Victor Vasili's daughter?" "I am." "And you've been serving drinks here for 8 months? Why? You slumming? Getting your kicks playing normal?" "I was living the life my mother wanted for me," Lena said simply. "But that's over now." "Because Marco fucked up," Sal added. He was older, rougher, with the kind of face that had stopped traffic, literally stopped it with bodies. "Hit the wrong girl." "He hit an innocent woman," Lena corrected. "The fact that she happened to be me just determined the consequences." "So what now?" Anthony leaned back in the booth, studying her. "You gonna take over, push Marco out, bring in your daddy's people and run things the Romanian way?" "No, I'm going to keep serving drinks and let Marco run his organization. But I'm also going to remind all of you, gently for now, that how you treat the people you think are powerless says everything about what kind of men you are." Vincent's eyes narrowed. "You preaching at us, princess?" "I'm observing. There's a difference." Lena closed her notepad. "Your drinks will be up in 5 minutes." She walked away feeling their eyes on her back, knowing she'd just crossed another line. You didn't lecture capos. You didn't challenge their worldview. You definitely didn't do it while wearing a uniform and carrying a drink tray. But she wasn't just a waitress anymore, and they needed to understand that. The bar was slammed, 3 deep with orders. Lena squeezed in next to the other servers, catching the bartender's attention with practiced ease. "Macallan 25, Pappy Van Winkle, and whatever's on tap," she called over the noise. "Heard," the bartender replied. Jake was a good guy, mid-20s, working his way through business school. He'd always been friendly to Lena, one of the few staff members who actually saw her as a person. "Hey, you okay? I heard about last night." "I'm fine." "That bruise doesn't look fine." "It looks like exactly what it is. Evidence that Marco DeLuca made a very expensive mistake." Lena accepted the drinks as Jake prepared them. "Thanks for asking, though." "For what it's worth, most of us are glad you're okay. What he did was bullshit. We all knew it, but nobody knew what to say." You could have said something at the time." Jake had the grace to look ashamed. "Yeah, we could have. We didn't. That's on us." Lena loaded the drinks onto her tray. "Then do better next time. All of you. Don't wait until someone's father shows up with guns before you decide to care about what's right." She delivered the drinks to Vincent's table, endured more scrutinizing stares, and moved on to her other tables. The night developed its own rhythm. Orders taken, drinks served, small talk navigated, tips collected. On the surface, it looked exactly like every other Friday night she'd worked at the Velvet Noir. But underneath, everything was different. People watched her differently, spoke to her differently. The usual grab-ass that servers had to navigate, the accidental touches, the invasive questions, the assumption that because you were serving them, you were somehow available to them, all of that stopped. Men who would have leered now nodded respectfully. Women who would have ignored her now offered tight smiles of acknowledgement. Fear and respect looked remarkably similar in the right light. Around 11, Marco appeared on the floor. He moved through the crowd like a shark through water, effortless, dangerous, commanding attention without seeming to seek it. He stopped at Vincent's booth, leaning down to say something Lena couldn't hear over the music and conversation. Then he straightened and looked directly at her. She felt that look like a physical touch, saw the question in his eyes. "Are you okay? Is this working?" Lena gave him the smallest nod. "I'm fine, we're fine, this is working." Marco returned the nod and moved on. But she noticed he didn't leave the main floor. He positioned himself at the bar where he could see her entire section, close enough to intervene if something went wrong, but not so close it looked like he was hovering, protecting her, honoring the oath. The realization settled warm in Lena's chest. He meant it. Whatever else Marco DeLuca was, criminal, killer, architect of a dozen schemes that would never see daylight, he was also a man who kept his promises. The trouble started around midnight. A group of men Lena didn't recognize took a table in her section, 4 of them, expensive suits, loud voices. The kind of aggressive entitlement that marked them as either very rich or very dangerous, possibly both. She approached with her usual professional smile. "Good evening, gentlemen. Can I start you with—" "Holy shit!" one of them interrupted, staring at her face. "You're her, the girl from the video." Lena's blood went cold. "I'm sorry?" "The video. Someone recorded the whole thing last night. You getting hit, making that phone call, the whole 9 yards. It's all over the dark web forums. You're like, famous now." Of course there was video. Of course someone had recorded it. In a room full of criminals and power brokers, someone always had their phone out, always documenting everything for leverage or entertainment or insurance. "I'm just here to take your drink order," Lena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Nah, fuck that." The man, late 30s, scar across his left eyebrow, New Jersey accent, leaned back in his chair. "We want to know if it's true." "Is Victor Vasile really your old man, the Victor Vasile? My family isn't relevant to your drinks order." "I think it's real relevant." Scarface grinned, and it wasn't friendly. "See, my boss has some history with the Vasile organization. Bad history. And he'd be real interested to know that Victor's little princess is right here in New York, working in Marco DeLuca's joint, basically unprotected." The temperature around the table seemed to drop. Lena felt it. The shift from obnoxious to dangerous, from annoying customers to active threat. "I'm going to give you one chance to rethink this conversation," she said quietly. "Or what? You going to call Daddy again? Make another dramatic phone call?" Scarface stood, his bulk forcing Lena to take a step back. "Here's what I think. I think you're a spoiled little rich girl playing dress-up. I think you got lucky last night. And I think—" He reached for her arm. He never made contact. Vincent appeared out of nowhere, his massive hand closing around Scarface's wrist with enough force to make bones grind. The sound cut through the ambient noise like a gunshot. "That's the dumbest thing you've done all week," Vincent said conversationally. "And trust me, I've seen some real stupid shit this week. The fuck are you? Get your hands off me." "See, here's your problem." Vincent twisted and Scarface went down to one knee with a strangled gasp. "You walked into this establishment, disrespected our employee, and put your hands on someone under Mr. DeLuca's personal protection. That's 3 strikes. You know what we do with 3 strikes? Marco materialized on Vincent's other side, his expression neutral, but his eyes promising violence. "Problem, Vincent?" "These gentlemen were just leaving, boss." "Isn't that right?" Scarface's 3 companions had gone very still, their hands carefully visible on the table. Their earlier bravado evaporated. They weren't stupid enough to start a fight in Marco DeLuca's territory. "We didn't know," one of them said quickly. "About the protection. Nobody told us." "You shouldn't have needed to be told," Marco said. "You put your hands on any woman in my establishment, you answer to me. You put your hands on her specifically?" He gestured to Lena. "You don't get to walk away." "Marco." Lena's voice cut through the tension. "Let him go." Every head turned to look at her. Marco's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. "Lena, let him go. He made a mistake. He won't make it again." "You sure about that?" Vincent asked, his grip still tight on Scarface's wrist. "I'm sure that breaking his arm won't teach him anything except that we're exactly what he thinks we are. Thugs who solve problems with violence." But Lena looked down at Scarface, who was staring up at her with pain and confusion warring in his eyes. But letting him walk away, knowing he was shown mercy by the woman he threatened, that might actually change something. Marco studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded to Vincent. "Let him go." Vincent released his grip. Scarface stumbled to his feet, cradling his wrist, his face red with humiliation. "You got lucky," he muttered. "No," Lena said quietly. "You did. Now take your friends and leave, And when your boss asks why you didn't grab Victor Vasili's daughter when you had the chance, you tell him this. Tell him she showed you mercy because she's not her father. But if you push her, she becomes him. And you really don't want that. The four men left, moving quickly, nearly running in their haste to escape. The surrounding tables had gone quiet, watching the drama unfold. When the door closed behind the men, normal conversation slowly resumed. Marco pulled Lena aside, his hand gentle on her elbow. That was a mistake. I should have broken that bastard's arm, sent a message. You did send a message, just a different one. That mercy is weakness? That power doesn't have to announce itself with violence. Lena touched her bruised cheek. You taught me that lesson last night, Marco. Remember? You hit me because you could, because it made you feel powerful. But all it really did was expose your weakness. Marco flinched. Lena, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to show you there's another way, a better way. She looked around the lounge at all the people watching them, whispering, judging. Your father spent his life taking orders because he was afraid. You've spent yours giving them because you were afraid of becoming him. But fear is fear, Marco. It just wears different faces. And you're not afraid? Lena thought about that question, about the terror she had felt when Marco's hand had connected with her face, about the shaking in her fingers when she dialed her father's number, about the weight of walking back into this place tonight, knowing everyone would be watching for weakness. I'm terrified, she admitted, every second, but I'm doing it anyway. That's the difference between courage and fearlessness. Fear isn't the enemy. Letting fear control you is. Marco was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the Velvet Noir continued its Friday night symphony, glasses clinking, laughter rising and falling, money changing hands in deals both legal and decidedly not. You're going to change everything, aren't you? He said finally. I'm going to try. And if I can't change with you? Lena met his eyes directly. Then you'll break the oath, and my father will finish what he started last night. It wasn't a threat, just a fact. Marco nodded slowly, accepting the reality of their arrangement. Finish your shift, he said. We'll talk tomorrow. Figure out next steps. Next steps toward what? Toward whatever the hell you're building here, because I'll be honest, Lena, I have no idea what you're doing, but I want to find out. He walked away, back toward his office, leaving Lena standing in the middle of the floor. She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and returned to work. The rest of the shift passed without incident. Tips were extraordinary, whether from genuine appreciation or fear, Lena couldn't say. Probably both. She served drinks, cleared tables, smiled at customers, and endured the constant awareness of being watched, evaluated, judged. At 2:30, Maya called last call. By 3, the lounge was empty except for staff cleaning up. Lena finished her closing duties, counted her tips, and changed out of her uniform in the employee bathroom. When she emerged, Vincent was waiting in the corridor. Boss wants to see you before you go, he said. It's 3 in the morning. Yeah, well, he doesn't sleep much these days. Lena followed Vincent back to Marco's office. He knocked once and pushed open the door without waiting for an answer. Marco sat at his desk, paperwork spread out in front of him, a half-empty bottle of scotch keeping the documents company. He looked up when they entered, his eyes bloodshot but alert. Vincent, give us a minute. Boss, I'll be fine. Go home. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's Saturday. We'll be even busier. Vincent left with obvious reluctance, closing the door behind him. Marco gestured to the chair across from his desk, the same chair Lena had sat in earlier that evening, a lifetime ago. You survived your first night, he said. Was there doubt? Honestly, a little. Marco poured 2 glasses of scotch and slid one across the desk to her. You handled that situation with those men better than I would have. You would have broken bones, sent a message. And you sent a different message. I'm still not sure which one was right. Lena picked up the glass but didn't drink. Maybe they're both right. Maybe the trick is knowing which message to send and when. That's what you're going to teach me? When to show mercy. I'm going to try, if you let me. Marco drained his glass and poured another. I've been thinking about what you said. About fear. About my father. About why I do what I do. And you're right. I've spent my whole life running from the image of my father on his knees, begging the Gambini family for more time, more chances, more mercy they never gave him. I swore I'd never kneel, never beg, never be powerless. But last night you knelt, Lena said quietly. Last night I knelt. For you. And you know what the weirdest part is? Marco laughed, but there was no humor in it. It didn't feel like weakness. It felt like clarity, like I finally understood something I'd been missing my whole life. What's that? That kneeling for the right reason is more powerful than standing for the wrong one. He looked at her directly. You could have let your father kill me. Should have, probably. I deserved it. But you didn't. You gave me another option, another chance. Why? Lena turned this glass in her hands, watching the amber liquid catch the light. Because my mother taught me that the measure of a person isn't their worst moment. It's what they do with the moments after. Your mother sounds like she was an extraordinary woman. She was. Kind, gentle, everything my father isn't. And she loved him anyway. Saw something in him worth loving. Lena set down the glass. I think she'd want me to see if there's something worth saving in you too. And if there isn't, then at least I tried. They sat in silence for a while, the office quiet except for the distant sound of staff finishing cleanup. Outside the windows, Manhattan glittered in the darkness. 8 million people, each one living their own complicated story. Get some rest, Marco said finally. Tomorrow we start figuring out what this partnership actually looks like. Lena stood. One question before I go. Shoot, when those men threatened me tonight, when Scarface reached for my arm, what did you feel? Marco considered the question carefully. Rage. Pure, white-hot rage. The same rage I felt when I thought you'd stolen from me. Except this time it was directed at the right target. And if I'd let Vincent break his arm, if I'd let you send your message with violence, then you would have been showing me that you're just like the rest of us. That mercy is a luxury, not a principle. That you talk about change, but when it comes down to it, you'll choose fear and control like everyone else in this world. Is that what you wanted me to choose? Marco met her eyes. Part of me did, because if you'd chosen that, I could keep being who I've always been. I wouldn't have to change. Wouldn't have to face the fact that maybe, there's a better way to build power than through fear. And now? Now I'm terrified that you're right. That I've wasted years building something brutal and unsustainable when I could have built something that actually mattered. He stood and walked her to the door. You're dangerous, Lena Hart. More dangerous than your father, because Victor Vasile scares people into submission. But you? You make them want to be better. And that's a hell of a lot harder to fight. Lena smiled. Good night, Marco. Good night. Text me when you get home safe. Since when do you care if your employees get home safe? Since one of them became the most important piece on the board. Dimitri was waiting outside, the Mercedes idling at the curb. He opened the door without comment, his expression carefully neutral despite the fact that it was 3:45 in the morning and Lena had just worked a full shift after being assaulted less than 24 hours earlier. Home? He asked. Home. The drive back to her apartment, her real apartment, not her father's penthouse, took 20 minutes through empty streets. Lena watched the city slide past, thinking about everything that had changed, everything that was still changing, everything that would change tomorrow and the day after. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. Dimitri says you survived. Proud of you, Fica Mia. Sleep well. Another text, this one from Marco. Thank you, for tonight. For showing me there's another way, I won't forget it. And a third from a number she didn't recognize. This is Anthony, from Vincent's table. You got balls, princess. Respect. You need anything, you let me know. Lena smiled and closed her phone. She was exhausted. Her feet ached. Her cheek throbbed. And she had to be back at work tomorrow night. But for the first time since her mother died, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Building something. Changing something. Mattering. The invisible girl had become visible. And the city would never be quite the same. 3 weeks passed like a fever dream. Lena fell into a rhythm that would have seemed impossible a month ago. Days spent studying the detailed reports Marco provided about his operations. Nights spent working the floor at the Velvet Noir. The hours between filled with meetings that reshaped the landscape of his empire one careful decision at a time. The bruise on her cheek faded from purple to green to yellow. finally disappearing entirely. But the memory of it remained, carved into the consciousness of everyone who'd witnessed that night. She became a walking reminder that power could shift in a heartbeat, that assumptions could be deadly, that the invisible were often the most dangerous. Marco's organization began to change in small but significant ways. The protection rackets became actual protection. Businesses paid, but they also received real security, insurance against threats both internal and external. The loan sharking operations implemented reasonable payment plans instead of compound interest designed to trap borrowers forever. The gambling dens started refusing customers who were clearly addicted, who were destroying their families chasing losses they'd never recover. It wasn't clean, it wasn't legal, but it was less cruel. And in Marco's world, that counted for something. Vincent remained skeptical, but he stopped calling her princess with quite so much contempt. Anthony became an unexpected ally, championing her ideas in meetings with the other capos. Even Sal, who'd been in the life since before Lena was born, grudgingly admitted that some of her suggestions made financial sense. But change created enemies, and enemies waited for opportunities. The opportunity came on a Thursday night in early November. Lena was in Marco's office, reviewing the books from one of his legitimate businesses, a chain of dry cleaners that existed primarily to launder money, but actually did clean clothes too. She'd discovered an accounting discrepancy, small enough to miss if you weren't looking carefully, large enough to matter if you were. "Someone's skimming," she said, pointing to the spreadsheet on Marco's laptop. "See here? The reported revenue doesn't match the actual deposits. It's only a few thousand a month, but it's consistent. Been going on for at least 6 months." Marco leaned over her shoulder, studying the numbers. He smelled like expensive cologne and scotch, a combination that had become familiar over the past weeks. "Which location?" "The one in Queens. The manager is—" Lena checked her notes. "Tommy Greco. One of your cousin's guys, right?" "Second cousin. And yeah, Tommy's been with the organization for years, since before I took over." Marco's jaw tightened. "You're sure about this?" "The numbers don't lie. Numbers can be manipulated. Mistakes happen. Not mistakes this consistent." Lena turned to look at him. "What do you want to do about it?" Marco was quiet for a long moment, his expression distant. "A month ago, I would have sent Vincent to have a conversation with Tommy. The kind of conversation that ends with broken fingers and a very clear message about what happens to thieves. And now? Now I have to ask myself if that's actually the most effective solution, or just the one I'm comfortable with." He moved away from the desk, pacing to the window that overlooked the lounge below. "You've been pushing me to think differently, to consider alternatives to violence, so what's the alternative here?" Lena closed the laptop and joined him at the window. Below, the Thursday night crowd was building, smaller than the weekend rush, but steady. She could see Maya directing the servers, see Jake working the bar, see the carefully choreographed dance of service and discretion that made the Velvet Noir profitable. "Talk to him first," she said. "Find out why he's skimming. Maybe he's in trouble. Maybe someone's pressuring him. Maybe he's just greedy. But you won't know unless you ask. And if he lies, then you'll know that too. People who are scared tell different lies than people who are arrogant." Marco considered this. "You want to come with me? See how I handle it?" "Is that wise? I'm still technically just a waitress. Your people might not appreciate me being involved in internal discipline. My people need to understand that you're more than a waitress, that this partnership is real." He checked his watch. "Tommy's shift at the dry cleaner ends at 9. We can catch him there, have a private conversation before he goes home." "All right. But Marco, remember what we talked about. Lead with questions, not accusations. Give him a chance to explain." "I'll try. But if he's stealing from me, if he's betraying the family, then we'll deal with it, together. But let's find out the truth first." They took Marco's car, a black BMW that was less conspicuous than his usual Mercedes. The drive to Queens took 40 minutes through evening traffic, giving Lena time to wonder if she was making a mistake. Getting involved in enforcement, even peaceful enforcement, pulled her deeper into Marco's world, made her more complicit in everything he did. But she'd made her choice 3 weeks ago when she'd claimed his life. There was no halfway in this world. You were either in or out, and she'd chosen in. The dry cleaner occupied a corner lot in a working-class neighborhood, wedged between a bodega and a check-cashing place. The neon sign flickered. Greco's Quality Dry Cleaning, casting pink and blue shadows across the sidewalk. Marco parked across the street. Through the windows, they could see Tommy Greco behind the counter, an older man with a drooping mustache and tired eyes, processing the last customers of the evening. "He looks harmless," Lena observed. "Everyone looks harmless until they're not." Marco's fingers drummed against the steering wheel. "You know what my father would say? He'd say Tommy's stealing because he thinks I'm weak, that I won't notice or won't care, that he can get away with it." "What do you say?" "I say I'm about to find out why a man who's been loyal for 20 years suddenly isn't." They waited until the last customer left, until Tommy flipped the sign to closed and started his closing procedures. Then Marco got out of the car and crossed the street, Lena following a step behind. The door was locked, but Marco knocked sharply. Tommy looked up, and even from outside, Lena could see the color drain from his face when he recognized his boss. He opened the door with shaking hands. "Mr. DeLuca, I wasn't expecting, I didn't know you were—" "Inside, Tommy, we need to talk." They entered the dry cleaner, the smell of chemical solvent strong in the air. Tommy locked the door behind them, his movements jerky with fear. He was sweating despite the chill of the evening. "Is there a problem, Mr. DeLuca? Because I can explain. I mean, if there's something—" "Sit down, Tommy." Marco's voice was calm, almost gentle. Lena recognized the tone from their conversations. He was trying to be different, trying to lead with questions instead of fists. Tommy sat on a stool behind the counter. Marco remained standing, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. Lena stayed near the door observing, ready to intervene if this went sideways. "How long have you been with the organization?" Marco asked. 22 years. Started with your father, stayed on when you took over. Never missed a payment, never complained, always. How long have you been skimming from the deposits?" The question landed like a physical blow. Tommy's face went from pale to ashen. His mouth opened and closed without sound. "I have the records, Tommy. 6 months of discrepancies. Small amounts, but consistent. So I'll ask you again, how long?" "I can explain." Tommy's voice cracked. "Please, Mr. DeLuca, let me explain." "That's why I'm here. Explain." Tommy's hands twisted together, fingers knotting and unknotting. "My daughter, Maria. She got sick 6 months ago. Leukemia. The treatments, the insurance doesn't cover everything. The experimental drugs, the specialists, He choked on the words. "I needed money. More money than I had. More than I could borrow without people asking questions." "So you stole from me." Marco's voice was flat, unreadable. "I was going to pay it back. Every penny. I just needed time. Once Maria's better, once she's through the worst of it, I'll work double shifts. "How is she?" Lena asked quietly from her position by the door. "Your daughter. How is Maria?" Tommy looked at her for the first time, really looked, seeing past the young woman to the unexpected compassion in her eyes. "She's fighting. Some days are better than others. The doctors say if she makes it through the next treatment cycle, her chances improve significantly." "And how much do you need? For the treatments?" What? How much money do you need to pay for your daughter's medical care?" Tommy's eyes filled with tears. 50,000. Maybe 60. "I know that's a lot. I know I've already taken—" "You've taken $4,000 over 6 months, Marco interrupted, "which means at your current rate, you'll have what you need in about 7 years, assuming the cancer waits that long." The cruelty of the math hung in the air. Tommy's shoulders slumped, defeat written in every line of his body. "I'm sorry, Mr. DeLuca. I know what this means. I know what happens to people who steal from the family. I couldn't watch my little girl die because I didn't have money. I couldn't—" "Stop." Marco held up a hand. He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Lena could see him struggling, weighing old instincts against new possibilities, measuring the man he'd been against the man he was trying to become. "Here's what's going to happen," Marco said finally. "You're going to give me the name of Maria's hospital and her doctors. You're going to sign whatever releases are necessary for me to talk to them directly. And then you're going to let me pay for her treatments." Tommy stared at him. "What?" "You heard me. I'll cover the medical expenses, all of them. In exchange, you stop skimming and you start being honest with me. You need something, you ask. You don't steal. We clear?" I don't understand. Why would you? Because my partner is making me rethink how I do business. Marco glanced at Lena. She keeps telling me that loyalty is bought with consistent action, not fear. So let's test that theory. I help you save your daughter. You remain loyal to the organization. Everyone wins. But the money I already took, consider it an advance against future earnings. You'll work it off. Just not by skimming, by actually doing your job and doing it well. Marco's tone hardened slightly. But Tommy, understand this. This mercy is a one-time offer. You betray me again, you lie to me again, and we go back to the old way of handling things. Do you understand? Yes. Yes, Mr. DeLuca, I understand. I'll never, thank you. Thank you so much. Tommy was crying openly now, shoulders shaking with relief and gratitude. Marco looked uncomfortable with the display of emotion, his usual armor of cool detachment not quite fitting anymore. Get me those medical records by tomorrow, he said gruffly. And Tommy, tell your daughter to fight hard. Tell her Marco DeLuca is betting on her. They left Tommy and his dry cleaner still crying, still mumbling thanks to a boss who'd just shown him mercy he hadn't expected and probably didn't think he deserved. Back in the car, Marco sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. He stared straight ahead at the flickering neon sign, his jaw tight. That was different, Lena said quietly. That was weak. That was leadership. Your father would have broken Tommy's hands and made an example of him. And you know what would have happened? Every other employee would have learned that even if they're desperate, even if their children are dying, they can't come to you for help. They'll steal or they'll leave, or they'll betray you to someone who offers them a better option. Marco turned to look at her. And what did they learn from what I just did? That loyalty runs both ways. That you take care of your people when they're in trouble. That asking for help is better than stealing. That mercy is possible. Lena met his eyes. You just invested $60,000 in Tommy Greco's loyalty. That's going to pay dividends you can't measure in spreadsheets. Or it makes me look soft. Makes other people think they can steal from me without consequences. Then we make sure they know this was an exception, not a rule. Tommy stole because his daughter was dying. That's different from someone skimming to buy a nicer car or fund a gambling habit. Your people are smart enough to see the difference. Marco started the engine. You're very confident about all this. One of us has to be. They drove in silence for a while, Manhattan's lights growing brighter as they crossed back into the city. Lena watched the neighborhoods change, from working-class Queens to gentrifying Brooklyn to the glittering sophistication of lower Manhattan, and thought about how much had changed in 3 weeks, how much more needed to change, how exhausting and exhilarating this transformation was. I have a meeting tomorrow night, Marco said as they approached the Velvet Noir, with the Calabrese family. They want to discuss territory boundaries, potential partnerships, the usual diplomatic bullshit. Okay. I want you there. Lena's head snapped toward him. At a sit-down with another family? Marco, that's necessary. The Calabreses have heard about you, about us. They want to meet the woman who reformed Marco DeLuca. His smile was bitter. That's what they're calling it. Reformed. Like I'm some kind of criminal turned saint. You're not reformed. You're evolving. There's a difference. Tell that to Anthony Calabrese. He's old school. Probably thinks I've gone soft. That my organization is vulnerable. That now's the perfect time to push into my territory. Is he right? Marco considered the question seriously. A month ago he would have been. But now? I don't know. We've restructured half our operations, made them more efficient, more profitable, less dependent on constant intimidation. The numbers are actually up across the board. Because people work better when they're not terrified, Lena said. Shocking concept. So you'll come to the meeting? If you think it will help, I think it will send a message that this partnership is real, that you're not just some figurehead I'm using for your father's connections. Marco pulled up to the back entrance of the Velvet Noir. Plus, I want them to see what I see when I look at you. And what's that? Marco turned to face her, and there was something in his expression she hadn't seen before. Something warmer than respect, deeper than fear, more complicated than simple alliance. The future, he said simply. You're the future of what this world could be if we're smart enough to let it evolve. The meeting with the Calabrese family was set for Friday night at a neutral location, an upscale Italian restaurant in Midtown that served as Switzerland for Manhattan's various criminal enterprises. The kind of place where enemies could break bread without worrying about bullets, where deals could be negotiated over wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Lena spent Friday afternoon preparing. She couldn't wear her waitress uniform to a sit-down. That would undercut the message Marco was trying to send. But she also couldn't show up looking like she was trying too hard, like some mobster's girlfriend playing dress-up. She settled on a simple black dress, elegant but not flashy, expensive but not ostentatious, and her mother's platinum necklace, the one piece of jewelry Victor had insisted she keep when she moved to America. Her hair she left down, a departure from the practical ponytail she wore at work. Minimal makeup except for her eyes, which she lined carefully, making them look larger, more striking. When she emerged from her bedroom, Victor, who'd insisted on being present for this meeting, gave a low whistle. "You look like your mother," he said in Romanian. "She would be proud of what you're building here, or horrified that I'm building it in a criminal empire. Your mother was pragmatic. She understood that change comes from within systems, not from outside them." Victor adjusted his tie. "She changed me, after all, made me into something almost human. If you can do the same for Marco De Luca, maybe there's hope for all of us." The restaurant was called Familia, which was either deeply ironic or completely on the nose, depending on your perspective. Red velvet banquettes, white tablecloths, oil paintings of the Italian countryside that were probably reproductions but looked expensive enough to be real. The Calabrese party was already there when they arrived. Anthony Calabrese himself, a silver-haired man in his 60s with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, flanked by his son Michael and his consigliere, a thin man named Sal Benedetto, who supposedly had more kills to his name than birthdays. Marco was there too, with Vincent standing behind his chair like a living weapon. The table was set for 8, wine already poured, bread already served. Civilized, peaceful, utterly deceptive. Anthony Calabrese stood when Lena entered, his eyes tracking her movement across the room with predatory interest. "Miss Vasile, a pleasure to finally meet you. Your reputation precedes you." "Does it?" Lena accepted his extended hand, noting his grip, firm but not aggressive, testing but not threatening. "I wasn't aware I had a reputation beyond being a competent waitress." "Oh, you're much more than that now." Anthony gestured to the empty chair beside Marco. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Victor took the seat on Lena's other side, his presence a silent reminder that she didn't come to this table alone, that any threat against her would be answered by forces that made the Calabrese family look small. "So," Anthony said once everyone was settled, "Marco tells me you've been consulting on his operations, making changes, improving efficiency." The way he said improving made it sound like an accusation. "I've offered some suggestions," Lena said carefully. "Marco's been kind enough to consider them." "Kind." Anthony smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "That's an interesting word, not one I usually associate with our friend Marco. He's been many things over the years. Ambitious, ruthless, effective, but rarely kind." "People change," Marco said. "Do they? Or do they just pretend to change while positioning themselves for a power grab?" Anthony leaned back in his chair. "Forgive my bluntness, Miss Vasile, but your presence here raises questions. Questions my organization needs answered before we can move forward with any partnership." "Ask them," Lena said. "Are you here representing your father's interests? Is this the Vasile family's way of expanding into American territory?" "I'm here representing myself. My father's organization has no designs on New York. They have more than enough territory in Eastern Europe." "Then what do you want? What's your angle in all this?" It was a fair question. Lena took a sip of wine, buying herself a moment to formulate an answer that was both honest and strategic. "I want to build something sustainable," she said finally. "The old ways of doing business, constant violence, territorial wars, everyone bleeding everyone else dry, that's dying. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but it's dying. The families that survive the next generation will be the ones that adapt, that learn to operate in gray areas instead of pure darkness, that build empires on something more stable than fear." "And you think Marco can build that kind of empire?" Anthony's tone was skeptical. "I think he's willing to try. That's more than most people in this world can say." Michael Calabrese spoke up for the first time. He was younger than his father, maybe early 40s, with the kind of face that had probably been handsome before violence and stress had carved lines into it. My father's concern is that your influence has made Marco weak, that he's losing his edge, that his territory is vulnerable. Your father's concern is that Marco's evolution threatens the status quo, Lena countered. If he succeeds in building something more sustainable, more profitable, more intelligent, that makes everyone else look primitive by comparison. That's not weakness, that's competition. Anthony Calabrese actually laughed. You've got spine, girl, I'll give you that. He turned to Marco. She always this direct? Always, Marco confirmed. It's refreshing, actually. I'm tired of people telling me what they think I want to hear. Refreshing or dangerous? Sal Benedetto asked, his voice quiet but cutting. Because in our world, honesty is often the first casualty of survival. Then maybe it's time to change our world, Lena said. The temperature at the table dropped several degrees. Sal's eyes narrowed. Michael shifted in his seat. Even Victor tensed slightly beside her. But Anthony Calabrese just studied her with new interest, like a chess player who just discovered his opponent was better than he'd anticipated. Change our world, he repeated. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple. It's necessary. You know it as well as I do, Mr. Calabrese. The FBI is getting smarter. The surveillance is getting better. The old families are falling one by one because they're stuck in patterns that don't work anymore. You can either evolve or become extinct. And you're going to save us all? Is that it? You and your reform mobster boyfriend are going to show us the light. He's not my boyfriend, Lena said. He's my partner. And I'm not trying to save anyone. I'm trying to build one sustainable operation. If it works, others can learn from it. If it doesn't, at least we tried something different. Anthony was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the white tablecloth. Around them, the restaurant hummed with normal Friday night energy. Couples on dates, families celebrating, people living oblivious to the fact that they were dining 50 feet from a meeting that could reshape the city's underworld. I came here tonight expecting to negotiate a truce while planning a war, Anthony said finally. But I'm leaving with something more interesting, a proposition. What kind of proposition? Marco asked, his voice carefully neutral. A test. You want to prove this new approach works? Prove it. There's a situation in Red Hook, territory we've both had our eyes on. Instead of fighting over it, let's see if your new methods can bring it under control better than the old ways would have. What's the catch? Vincent asked from behind Marco's chair. No catch. You handle Red Hook your way. If it works, if you can establish control without triggering a war, without massive bloodshed, while still turning a profit, then maybe there's something to this evolution theory. Maybe we can all learn something. And if it doesn't work? Lena asked. Anthony's smile was sharp. Then Marco looks weak. His people lose faith. His territory becomes vulnerable. And I take what's mine. It was a trap dressed up as an opportunity, and everyone at the table knew it. But it was also exactly the kind of challenge that could prove whether Lena's philosophy actually worked in practice or was just pretty theory. I'll do it, Marco said before Lena could speak. Give me Red Hook. I'll show you a new way to build power. 30 days? Anthony said. Establish control, turn a profit, keep the peace. Can you do it? Marco looked at Lena. She saw the question in his eyes. Can we do this? She thought about Tommy Greco and his dying daughter, about the changes they'd already implemented, about mercy and strategy and the possibility that power could be built on something other than fear. We can do it, she said. Anthony raised his wine glass. Then let's drink to evolution and to Red Hook. May the best approach win. They drank. They ate. They made small talk about neutral topics, sports, weather, the mayor's latest scandal. But underneath the civility, everyone at that table understood what had just happened. Marco DeLuca had been challenged, and his response would determine not just his future, but the future of how power was built in this city. When they finally left the restaurant, Victor pulled Lena aside while Marco spoke quietly with Vincent. That was reckless, her father said in Romanian. Red Hook is a mess. Competing gangs, drug trade, violence that would make my operations look peaceful. Anthony Calabrese just handed Marco a poisoned gift. I know. And you accept it anyway. Because if we can make it work there, we can make it work anywhere. This isn't just about Red Hook, Tata. It's about proving that evolution is possible, that we don't have to keep doing things the way they've always been done. Victor's expression softened slightly. You sound like your mother. She used to say things like that. Used to believe that people could change, systems could improve, that love could redeem even monsters like me. Was she right? About me? Maybe. I tried to be better for her, tried to build something she wouldn't be ashamed of. But this world... He gestured vaguely at the city around them. This world doesn't reward kindness, Lena. It punishes weakness. And kindness looks a lot like weakness to predators like Anthony Calabrese. Then we'll have to be kind and strong, merciful and strategic. We'll have to prove that those things aren't contradictions. Marco joined them, Vincent at his shoulder. Ready to start planning how to conquer Red Hook without actually conquering anyone? Ready, Lena confirmed. They walked to the cars together, Victor heading back to his penthouse, Marco and Lena returning to the Velvet Noir to start mapping out their strategy for the most important 30 days of Marco's criminal career. The November wind cut through Manhattan's streets, carrying the smell of coming winter. Somewhere in Red Hook, people were living their lives unaware that they'd just become the testing ground for a philosophy that could change everything. Lena pulled her coat tighter and thought about her mother, about kindness and strength, about the possibility of redemption, about 30 days to prove that invisible people could reshape the world. The game was on. Red Hook sprawled along the Brooklyn waterfront like a bruise that refused to heal. Once a thriving industrial neighborhood, it had declined into a patchwork of warehouses, housing projects, and desperation. 3 gangs fought over scraps of territory. The Diablos controlled the drug trade on the eastern blocks, the Red Hook boys ran protection rackets near the piers, and a loose coalition of Irish remnants called the Docks held everything in between through sheer stubbornness and violence. Marco's first instinct, he admitted to Lena during their strategy session, would have been to come in hard. Send Vincent and a crew, break some heads, make examples of the gang leaders, establish dominance through fear. It was the playbook his father would have used, the playbook every organization in the city still used. But that's not what we're doing, Lena said, spreading maps of Red Hook across the conference table in Marco's office. It was 2 a.m, and they'd been planning for hours, fueled by coffee and the understanding that they had 29 days left to accomplish the impossible. So what are we doing? Vincent asked from his position by the door. He'd been skeptical of every suggestion so far, which Lena had learned to appreciate. Vincent's skepticism kept them honest, forced them to think through weaknesses in their plans. We're giving them something better than what they have, Lena said. Right now, these gangs are fighting over poverty, over the right to squeeze money from people who don't have any. That's not sustainable. That's not even profitable in the long term. So we just give them money? Anthony, Marco's Anthony, not Calabrese, sounded incredulous. We show up with bags of cash and hope they play nice? No, we give them opportunity, real opportunity. Lena pointed to the map. Look at the waterfront. Prime real estate that's being wasted because nobody can establish enough control to develop it. The neighborhood is full of people who need jobs, need services, need hope. What if we could provide all of that? Marco leaned forward, studying the map with new eyes. You're talking about going legitimate. I'm talking about building infrastructure. You set up businesses, real businesses that actually function, and you give the gang members jobs in them. Take the Diablos. Most of them are dealing because it's the only way they know to make money. What if you offered them construction jobs, security positions, legitimate income that doesn't come with the constant risk of prison or death? They'll never go for it, Vincent said flatly. These kids, they think slinging drugs makes them tough, makes them somebody. You offer them a construction job, they'll laugh in your face. Then we make sure the construction jobs come with respect, with status, with the understanding that they're building something that belongs to them. Lena looked around the table at Marco's inner circle. The old model is parasitic. You extract value from a community until there's nothing left. What I'm proposing is symbiotic. You invest in the community, it grows, and you profit from that growth. Everyone wins. Sal, the oldest of Marco's capos, spoke up. And how exactly do we invest without looking like we're trying to take over? The minute we show up in Red Hook with money and plans, Every gang there is going to think it's a trap. Because it usually is, Marco acknowledged. He looked at Lena. How do we approach this without triggering a war? We start small. We don't go to the gang leaders first. We go to the community. Find out what they actually need. The next morning, Lena walked into Red Hook alone. Marco had nearly lost his mind when she'd proposed it, but she'd been firm. If she showed up with bodyguards and muscle, she'd be just another power player trying to intimidate the neighborhood into submission. But if she showed up alone, asking questions instead of making demands, maybe, people would actually talk to her. Dmitri followed at a distance in an unmarked car, close enough to intervene if things went bad, far enough to maintain the illusion of Lena's independence. Victor had made his opinion on this plan crystal clear, but ultimately he deferred to his daughter's judgment, though not without assigning 3 additional men to shadow Dmitri, just in case. The community center was a converted warehouse on Van Brunt Street, its walls covered in murals that had faded to ghosts of their original colors. Inside, a tired-looking woman in her 50s was setting up chairs for what a flyer announced as Free Legal Aid Clinic, Saturdays 10 to 2. Can I help you? The woman asked, eyeing Lena's designer coat with suspicion. I hope so. My name is Lena. I'm doing research on community needs in Red Hook. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Research for what? Another gentrification project? Because we don't need more luxury condos that nobody here can afford. Not gentrification, investment. There's a difference. The woman, her name was Carmen Rodriguez, and she'd run this community center for 15 years, studied Lena for a long moment. Then she sighed and gestured to one of the folding chairs. Sit, talk. But if you're wasting my time, I'm going to be very clear about that. Lena spent 3 hours with Carmen, learning about Red Hook's real problems. The lack of jobs that paid living wages. The food deserts where fresh produce was harder to find than drugs. The kids who joined gangs not because they were violent, but because gangs were the only organizations that offered belonging and purpose. The elderly residents who were afraid to leave their apartments after dark. The small business owners who paid protection to 3 different gangs and still got robbed. What Red Hook needs, Carmen said, is hope. Real, tangible hope. Not promises from politicians who never follow through. Not charity that makes people feel like failures. Hope that comes from being able to work, to earn, to build something for your family. What if I told you I might be able to provide that? Carmen's laugh was bitter. Then I'd say you're either naive or lying. Nobody invests in Red Hook unless they're trying to push us out and cash in on the waterfront views. I'm not interested in pushing anyone out. I'm interested in building something sustainable, but I need to understand what's actually needed before I can help provide it. Over the next week, Lena became a fixture in Red Hook. She talked to shop owners and teachers, to mothers and gang members, to anyone who would give her 5 minutes. She documented everything, the broken streetlights that made certain blocks dangerous, the abandoned buildings that could be converted to useful space, the skills people had that weren't being utilized. And slowly, a picture emerged, not of a neighborhood that needed to be conquered, but of a community that needed to be supported. Marco met her each evening at the Velvet Noir, where she'd transformed from community organizer back into waitress, serving drinks while her mind spun with possibilities. On the 8th night, she finally had a plan complete enough to present. We start with infrastructure, she said, spreading her notes across Marco's desk. There's an abandoned warehouse on Dwight Street. We buy it, convert it to a community hub. Ground floor becomes a job training center and a food co-op where people can buy fresh produce at cost. Second floor becomes small business incubators, help people start legitimate enterprises. That's not going to make us money, Vincent objected. Not immediately, but it establishes us as investors, not invaders. It builds trust. Lena continued. Phase 2, we approach the gang leaders individually, not with threats, with job offers, real positions in real companies. The Diablos' leader is a kid named Miguel Santos. He's smart, has business instincts, but he's stuck in the drug trade because it's all he knows. We offer him a management position in a security company, legitimate work, good pay, room for advancement. He'll think it's a trap, Marco said. Probably. That's why we let him vet the offer. Let him talk to people we've already hired. Let him see that it's real. And if he says no, Then we move to the next person. We don't force anyone. We just keep offering alternatives until enough people accept that the gangs start falling apart on their own. It was ambitious, it was expensive, it was completely unprecedented in Marco's world. This is going to cost me a fortune, Marco said. In the short term, yes, but think long term. You invest $1 million now in Red Hook infrastructure. In 5 years, you own legitimate businesses that generate real profit. You have a neighborhood full of people who are loyal because you gave them opportunity, not because you terrorized them. You have a model you can replicate in other territories. Marco looked at Vincent. What do you think? I think it's insane, Vincent said bluntly. I also think it might work. These kids in Red Hook, they're not ideological. They're pragmatic. They're in gangs because gangs offer what society doesn't. We offer something better, backed up by real resources and real commitment. Some of them will take it. Some isn't all. No, Lena agreed. Some will fight us. Some will see any change as a threat. That's where we need to be strategic. We identify the reasonable people and work with them. The unreasonable ones will either adapt or become irrelevant. Over the next 2 weeks, Marco's organization became something it had never been before. A construction company, a jobs program, a community development initiative. The abandoned warehouse was purchased through a shell corporation, renovated by crews that included former gang members who were paid union wages for legitimate work. Miguel Santos took 3 meetings before he agreed to even consider Marco's offer. The young man was 24, with sharp eyes and scars that told stories he'd never share. He came to each meeting expecting violence, expecting betrayal, expecting everything except what he got: respect and a genuine opportunity. Why should I trust you? Miguel asked during their final meeting. You're Marco De Luca. Everyone knows what you are. I'm a criminal, Marco agreed. I'm not going to lie about that, but I'm also a businessman, and I've learned that you make more money building things than destroying them. This her influence? Miguel nodded toward Lena, who sat quietly in the corner of the room. Word is she's the one changing you, making you soft. I'm making him smart, Lena said. There's a difference. Soft would be giving you money for nothing. Smart is offering you a job where you earn money, build skills, and create something that lasts longer than your next drug deal. Miguel considered this. And if I say yes, what happens to my crew? The guys who've been loyal to me? Bring them with you, Marco said. Anyone who wants legitimate work, we'll find a place for them. Anyone who wants to stay in the drug trade, that's their choice. We're not forcing anyone. The docs aren't going to like this. Neither are the Red Hook boys. They'll see it as you making a move. Then we make them the same offer. Everyone gets a chance to evolve. Miguel stood, walked to the window, looked out at Red Hook's industrial landscape. My mother, she cleans offices in Manhattan, takes 2 buses each way, comes home exhausted, makes barely enough to keep us fed. You know what she tells me? She tells me to get out, get a real job, stop risking my life for pocket change. Sounds like a smart woman. She is, which is why I'm going to accept your offer. Not because I trust you, I don't, but because I trust that you're right about one thing. This life I'm living, it doesn't have a future, just a countdown to prison or death. The dominoes started falling. Miguel brought his top lieutenants into the security company. The food co-op opened and immediately became the cheapest place to buy fresh produce in Red Hook. The job training center enrolled 30 people in its first week, but not everyone was happy about the changes. The Red Hook boys' leader, a violent enforcer named Danny Reese, saw Marco's investment as an invasion. On the 20th day of the 30-day challenge, he made his move. The food co-op burned. Lena got the call at 4 in the morning. She was at the scene 30 minutes later, Marco beside her, watching firefighters battle the blaze that consumed their investment and their credibility. This is Danny Reese's work, Vincent said, his face tight with controlled rage. He did this to send a message, to show the neighborhood that Marco can't protect them. Then we send a message back, Anthony said. We find Danny and we end him. Make an example that everyone in Red Hook will remember. No. Lena's voice cut through the anger. That's exactly what he wants. He wants us to respond with violence, to prove that we're just like every other organization that's tried to control Red Hook. We respond with violence, we lose everything we've built. We respond with nothing. We look weak, Vincent countered. We don't respond with nothing. We respond with resilience. Lena turned to Marco. How fast can we rebuild? What? The co-op. How fast can we rebuild it? Better than before. Bigger than before. Marco's eyes widened as he understood. A week. Maybe less if we push. Then we push. We rebuild in 3 days. We show the neighborhood that burning our investment doesn't stop us. It just makes us more committed. And Danny Reese? Anthony asked. We offer him a job. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the firefighters seemed to pause in their work. You want to offer a job to the man who just burned down our building? Vincent's voice was dangerously quiet. I want to offer him a choice. He can keep fighting us, keep destroying things, and eventually we'll have to remove him. Or he can accept that change is coming to Red Hook, whether he likes it or not, and he can be part of building something instead of tearing it down. He'll never accept. Probably not, but we make the offer anyway. In public. In front of the whole neighborhood. So when we eventually do have to remove him, everyone will know we tried the peaceful route first. Danny Reese was a bull of a man, late 30s, with a face that had clearly lost arguments with fists and bottles. He held court in a bar on Conover Street, surrounded by his crew, 18 men who looked like they'd learned violence early and never learned anything else. Lena walked into that bar on day 22 with Marco at her side and no other backup. The same calculated risk she'd taken when she first entered Red Hook, multiplied by the fact that everyone in this room knew she represented the organization Danny was fighting. The conversation stopped when they entered. 18 pairs of eyes tracked their movement across the sticky floor to where Danny sat in a booth, a beer in one hand and casual menace in his posture. Marco DeLuca, Danny said, his voice carrying across the silent bar. You got some balls walking in here after what happened to your little grocery store. Community co-op, Lena corrected. And we're rebuilding it. Should be open again by Monday. Danny's eyes shifted to her. You're the Vasily girl, the one who's got Marco's leash. I'm Lena, and I'm here to make you an offer. Not interested. You haven't heard it yet. Don't need to. I know how this works. You come in here all peaceful, talking about opportunities and progress, and next thing I know, I'm working for you and my neighborhood's full of your people. That's occupation dressed up as charity. You're right, Lena said, and the admission clearly surprised him. From your perspective, that's exactly what it looks like. An outsider coming in to take over. But here's what I see. I see a neighborhood bleeding out. I see kids joining gangs at 13 because gangs are the only organizations that want them. I see families struggling to eat. I see potential being wasted on turf wars that don't benefit anyone except the coroner. That's real touching, but it doesn't change the fact that you're trying to push us out. We're not trying to push you out. We're trying to give you options. You want to keep running protection rackets? Fine, but understand that we're offering legitimate alternatives. And as more people take those alternatives, your business model becomes obsolete. Danny stood, his bulk making the booth creak. So what's this offer? What do you want from me? I want you to manage the rebuild of the co-op. The bar erupted in laughter. Danny's crew thought it was the funniest thing they'd heard all week, the guy who burned down the building being offered a job to rebuild it. But Danny wasn't laughing. He was studying Lena with new intensity, trying to figure out if this was genuine or the setup for an elaborate revenge plot. Why would you trust me with that? He asked. Because you know this neighborhood better than I do. Because your crew needs work and this would provide it. Because I'd rather have you building with us than fighting against us. And because... Lena leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping so only Danny could hear. Because I think you're tired. I think you're exhausted from fighting and violence and looking over your shoulder. I think part of you wants out, but you don't know how to get there without looking weak. Danny's jaw tightened. For a moment, Lena thought he might actually hit her, might prove that violence was the only language he spoke. Then he laughed. Not the mocking laughter of his crew, but something more genuine, almost relieved. You got me all figured out, huh? No, but I recognize the look of someone who's trapped in a role they don't want anymore. I wore that look for 8 months while serving drinks to people who never saw me. Danny looked at Marco. This really her plan? Or is this you being smart? It's all her, Marco said. I'm just learning to see things differently. And if I say yes, if I actually take this job and rebuild your co-op, what happens to my crew? What happens to the Red Hook boys? You transform them, from a gang into a construction company, from enforcers into builders. Some of them won't make the transition. That's fine. But the ones who do, they get to keep their loyalty to you while building something that might actually last. Danny was quiet for a long time. His crew watched him, waiting for the signal to throw Lena and Marco out, to respond to this insult with the violence that had always been their answer. 3 conditions, Danny said finally. 1. My guys get paid same as everyone else. No charity wages. 2. We're equal partners in the rebuild. I don't just work for you, I work with you. 3. When it's done, when the co-op's running again, you put up a plaque that says, "Rebuilt by the Red Hook Boys." We get the credit. Done, Lena said immediately. All 3 conditions. Accepted. They shook on it. And in that moment, in a dive bar in Red Hook that smelled like beer and broken dreams, something fundamental shifted. The co-op reopened on day 28, bigger and better than before. The plaque by the entrance read, "Rebuilt by the Red Hook Boys in partnership with DeLuca Development." Danny Reese stood at the ribbon cutting wearing a suit that fit him awkwardly, surrounded by his crew who looked equally uncomfortable in legitimate business attire but undeniably proud. Carmen Rodriguez spoke at the reopening, her voice carrying over the crowd that had gathered. 2 months ago, if someone had told me that Red Hook would come together like this, that gang members would be working legitimate jobs, that hope would be something we could actually see and touch, I would have thought they were dreaming. But here we are. Dreams made real through investment, through trust, through people choosing to build instead of destroy. Miguel Santos was there, now head of security for 3 DeLuca development properties. The Docks had negotiated their own deal, a union contract for their crew to work on the waterfront development Marco was planning. Even the Diablos' lower-level dealers had mostly transitioned to legitimate work, drawn by steady paychecks and the radical concept of going to bed without wondering if tonight was the night they'd get arrested or killed. On day 30, exactly 1 month after accepting Anthony Calabrese's challenge, Marco walked into Familia Restaurant with Lena at his side. The same table, the same players, but the atmosphere was different, changed. Anthony Calabrese stood when they entered, and this time his respect was genuine. "I'll admit," he said as they sat, "I expected to come here tonight to discuss how I was going to carve up your territory. I gave you an impossible task. Red Hook has broken better men than you." "And yet here we are," Marco said. "Here you are indeed. You want to tell me how you did it?" "We stopped trying to conquer and started trying to invest. We gave people alternatives instead of ultimatums. We built instead of destroyed." Anthony looked at Lena. "Your influence, I assume?" "Our collaboration," Lena corrected. "Marco had the resources and the network. I just helped him see how to use them differently." "Well, whatever you did, it worked. I have reports from my people in Red Hook. The violence is down 70%. Legitimate business revenue is up. The gangs that used to fight each other are now working together. It's remarkable. Almost miraculous." "It's not a miracle," Marco said. "It's just what happens when you give people hope and opportunity instead of fear and suppression." "And you think this can be replicated? In other neighborhoods, other territories?" "I know it can." Anthony leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Then perhaps we should discuss expanding this partnership. The Calabrese family has territories that could benefit from this approach, and I'm willing to admit when someone has taught me something new." They talked for 2 hours, negotiating not a division of territory, but a collaboration in transformation. The old families learning new methods, the new philosophy scaling to reach more communities, the possibility that crime could evolve into something less parasitic, more symbiotic with the neighborhoods it operated in. When they finally left the restaurant, Marco and Lena walked through Manhattan's streets without speaking, both processing what they'd accomplished, what they'd proven. "You changed everything," Marco said finally. "You know that, right? One phone call, one slap, and you changed the entire trajectory of my life, of my organization, maybe of this whole city." "You changed yourself," Lena countered. "I just showed you it was possible." They reached the Velvet Noir, but instead of going inside, Marco gestured toward the river. They walked to the edge of the pier, looking out at the water, at the lights reflecting off the dark surface. "I need to tell you something," Marco said, And I need you to hear it as truth, not manipulation or strategy or any of the games we play in this world. Okay, I'm falling in love with you. The words hung in the cold November air, honest and vulnerable and terrifying. Lena felt her heart constrict, felt the weight of everything those words meant in their complicated reality. Marco, I know all the reasons it's a bad idea. You're Victor Vasili's daughter. I'm the man who hit you, who humiliated you, who would have destroyed your life if you'd been anyone else. I know that what we have is a partnership based on an oath I swore to save my own life. But Lena, he turned to face her fully. Somewhere in the past month, you stopped being an obligation and started being everything. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up, the last thing I think about before I sleep. You're the voice in my head that asks if I'm being the man I want to be or just the man I'm afraid of becoming. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything. Not yet. Just keep working with me. Keep teaching me. Keep showing me that change is possible. And maybe, eventually, if you can forgive me for how we started, if you can see past the monster I was to the man I'm trying to become, maybe we can be something more than partners. Lena looked at this man who had struck her a month ago, who had been her enemy before becoming her project, before becoming something she couldn't quite name. She saw the changes in him, the way he listened now instead of commanded, the way he chose mercy over violence, the way he'd learned to see people instead of assets or threats. But she also saw the man underneath all that change, still flawed, still dangerous, still carrying the weight of years of violence and choices that couldn't be undone. I need time, she said finally, to figure out what I feel, what's real, and what's just the intensity of everything we've been through. I can give you time, I can give you whatever you need. Can you give me honesty, always, even when it's hard? Yes. Can you give me the promise that you'll keep changing, keep evolving, keep choosing to be better? I can try. That's all anyone can promise. That they'll try. Lena reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining in the cold. Then try. Keep trying. And I'll try to figure out if what I'm feeling is love or partnership or something entirely new that we don't have words for yet. They stood together on the pier, the city spreading out around them in all its complicated beauty. Somewhere in Red Hook, people were going to bed with hope for the first time in years. Somewhere in the Calabrese territory, Anthony was rethinking how power could be built. Somewhere across the city, small changes were rippling outward, proving that evolution was possible even in the darkest corners of human enterprise. 6 months later, Lena stood in the same community center where she'd first met Carmen Rodriguez. But this time, she wasn't gathering information. She was cutting the ribbon on the Red Hook Community Foundation, a nonprofit funded by DeLuca Development that would support small businesses, provide scholarships, and continue the work of transforming the neighborhood from the inside out. Marco stood beside her, but not as her boss or even her partner. He stood as something more complicated and more beautiful, as the man who'd learned to love the woman who'd saved him from himself. They'd taken it slow, 6 months of dinners that might have been dates or might have been business meetings. 6 months of conversations that ranged from organizational strategy to childhood memories to dreams they'd never spoken aloud before. 6 months of Marco proving through consistent action that he could be trusted, that he could change, that he could love someone without trying to own them. Victor had visited 3 times, watching his daughter and the reformed mobster with skeptical but ultimately accepting eyes. Your mother would approve, he'd said during his last visit. She always believed that love could redeem anyone, even me. Even him. The neighborhood had transformed. Crime was down, legitimate business was up, gang members had become construction workers, security guards, small business owners. The violence that had defined Red Hook for decades had been replaced by something unprecedented, hope backed by tangible investment. Other neighborhoods were watching, other organizations were asking how it had been done. The model was spreading, slowly but surely, proving that evolution was possible when you invested in people instead of just exploiting them. You ready? Marco asked, holding the oversized scissors that would officially open the foundation. Ready, Lena confirmed. They cut the ribbon together, and the crowd applauded. A mix of residents who'd lived in Red Hook for generations and newcomers drawn by the changes, gang members turned businessmen, and community leaders who'd fought for this transformation. Carmen found Lena afterward, pulling her into a tight hug. You did it. You actually did what you said you'd do. You gave us hope. You gave us a future. We all did it together, Lena said. I just helped provide resources. You and Danny and Miguel and everyone else, you did the real work of changing. Don't be modest. You walked into Red Hook alone and unarmed, with nothing but ideas and conviction. You bet everything that people were better than the circumstances that had trapped them. And you were right. As the celebration continued around them, Marco pulled Lena aside. They found a quiet corner, away from the crowd, where they could hear each other without shouting. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Marco, if this is... It's not a ring. Not yet. We're not there yet. He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a delicate platinum necklace with a single pendant. A key. A key? Lena asked. To the Velvet Noir. You stopped working there 3 months ago, but I want you to know that place is as much yours as mine. Everything I have, everything I've built, it's ours. Not mine to give you. Ours to share. Lena took the necklace, feeling the weight of the key against her palm. I don't want your empire, Marco. I know. That's why I'm offering it. Because you're the only person I trust to help me make it into something worth having. She let him fasten the necklace around her neck, the key settling just above her heart. Then she turned and kissed him. Not their first kiss, but the first one that felt like a promise instead of a question. When they finally pulled apart, Marco's eyes were bright with emotion he no longer tried to hide. I love you, he said. I love who you are. I love who you make me want to be. I love that you saw something worth saving in a man who'd hit you. I love that you're teaching me that power can be built on hope instead of fear. I love you too, Lena said, and the words felt true. Not simple, not uncomplicated, but true. I love that you were willing to change, that you keep choosing to be better, that you honor the oath you swore not because you're afraid of my father, but because you actually care about being a man of your word. They walked back to the celebration hand in hand, the invisible girl who'd become visible, and the feared boss who'd learned that mercy could be stronger than violence. Together, they'd proven that people could change, that systems could evolve, that even in the darkest corners of power, redemption was possible if you were brave enough to reach for it. The party continued late into the evening. Lena found herself talking with Miguel, who was engaged now to a teacher from the neighborhood and planning to open his own security consulting firm. With Danny, whose construction company was bidding on contracts across Brooklyn. With the dozens of people whose lives had changed because someone had invested in them instead of just extracting from them. As the sun set over Red Hook, painting the waterfront in shades of gold and amber, Lena thought about the journey that had brought her here. One slap, one phone call, one choice to claim a life instead of taking it, and from that moment, everything had changed. She touched the pendant around her neck, the key to an empire she'd never wanted but had learned to reshape. She looked at Marco, who was laughing at something Anthony Calabrese was saying. Their former rivalry transformed into genuine partnership. She thought about her mother, who'd believed that love could redeem anyone, and her father, who'd proven that belief true by loving her mother enough to let their daughter choose a different path. Lena Elena Vasile, had stopped being invisible. But more than that, she'd learned that visibility came with responsibility. The responsibility to use power wisely. To build instead of destroy. To invest in hope instead of profiting from fear. The city lights began to flicker on as darkness fell, 8 million stories continuing in the metropolis around them. But here in Red Hook, at least, the story had changed. The ending was no longer predetermined. The future was no longer just a countdown to violence or imprisonment or death. The future was open, full of possibility, built on the foundation of people who'd chosen to evolve. And in that future, there was room for love, for redemption, for the radical idea that even those who'd done terrible things could become better if given the chance and the support and the belief that change was possible. Marco found her as the party was winding down, the crowd thinning as people headed home to lives that were more stable, more hopeful than they'd been 6 months ago. You ready to go? He asked. Almost. One more thing. Lena walked to the center of the room and raised her voice to address the remaining crowd. I want to thank everyone who made this possible. Everyone who took a risk on believing that change could happen. Everyone who chose to build instead of destroy. You've proven that transformation is possible. that invisible people can reshape the world, that mercy and strength aren't contradictions. She paused, her eyes finding the faces of people who'd become friends, allies, family, in the months since she'd walked into Red Hook alone and unarmed with nothing but conviction and hope. My mother used to tell me that the measure of a person isn't their worst moment. It's what they do with the moments after. All of you, all of us, we've proven that true. We've taken our worst moments and used them as fuel for something better. And we're going to keep doing that, keep evolving, keep proving that the future doesn't have to look like the past. The applause that followed was genuine and warm, a community acknowledging its own transformation. Later, in Marco's car, heading back to Manhattan, Lena and Marco sat in comfortable silence. The key pendant rested against her chest, a reminder of everything they'd built and everything they were still building. "What are you thinking?" Marco asked. "That 6 months ago, I was an invisible waitress trying to stay out of everyone's way. And now I'm here, helping reshape criminal empires, dating the man who once hit me, building futures for people I didn't know existed." Regret any of it? Lena considered the question seriously. The pain of that first slap, the fear of calling her father, the risk of every choice she'd made since, the complicated reality of loving a man who'd hurt her but had proven capable of change. "No," she said finally, "I don't regret it. Because every hard moment led to this, to hope, to transformation, to the possibility that people can be better if we give them the chance and the support and the belief that they're worth saving." Marco reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining the way they had on the pier that first night when he'd confessed his love. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we keep going, keep building, keep proving that evolution is possible." Lena smiled. "And maybe eventually, when we're ready, we figure out what comes next for us. Together." I like the sound of that. Together. The city lights blurred past the windows as they drove, Manhattan welcoming them back into its glittering embrace. Somewhere behind them, Red Hook was settling into sleep with hope in its heart. Somewhere ahead, new challenges waited. Territories to transform, systems to evolve. The constant work of proving that change was possible. But for now, in this moment, Lena let herself simply be. Not invisible. Not just Victor Vasily's daughter. Not just Marco DeLuca's partner. Just Lena. A woman who'd learned that power came in many forms. That mercy could be strategic. That love could redeem. That transformation was always possible if you were brave enough to reach for it. The invisible girl had become visible. The feared boss had become capable of love. And together, they'd proven that even in the darkest corners of power, light could find its way in. The story that had begun with violence had ended with hope. And that, Lena thought as she leaned against Marco's shoulder, watching the city slide past in the darkness, was the most powerful transformation of all.